Hi, and welcome back to yet another video. This is the 12th episode of the story about the time when Sasuke gives his sharingan eyes to Naruto on verge death in waves. Let's watch as Naruto Uzumaki, Uchiha takes world by storm. After you've finished watching, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Jiraiya walked out of a small border town of Uzumaki while grumbling disgruntledly. He was in the area to meet with a contact to get the last bit of information needed to finalize Naruto's training trip. But the informant didn't even have the decency to meet him in one of the famous, or infamous depending who you asked, resort towns. Not wanting to miss out on prime research material, the hermit decided to stop on the last town on Uzumaki's border. The country itself was famous for its hot springs and resorts, filled with bright lights, beautiful girls, and all the alcohol a man could drink. That little puissant town had none of that, and it would be better for everyone if that experience became permanently repressed in Jiraiya's subconscious, never to be unlocked. Luckily the town was right next to Tanokuni and had an excellent selection of incredibly potent rice wine, so the hermit had all the supplies he needed for the day's to-do list. Unfortunately it was not to be when an explosion rang out a couple miles past the border. The spy master knew that his old teammate had sunk his claws deep into the country, so it was pretty much his duty to go see if anybody needed help. Jiraiya looked forlornly at his recently purchased booze before staring towards the blast site. He repeated the process several times before shrugging and taking off towards the smoke billowing in the air while swilling sake straight from the bottle, moving at a pace few could hope to match. Jiraiya was starting to feel a heavy buzz when he noticed that there was a path cut through the long grass that he was running parallel to, and it appeared to be relatively fresh. Figuring the person would probably be running away from the explosion, he tossed the container over his shoulder before turning around and following the trail. It didn't go far before abruptly ending, and lying unconscious in the meadow was a girl who appeared to be in her early teens carrying enough shinobi gear to supply several teams. Her clothes were ripped and shredded while what little of her body was exposed appeared to be littered with scrapes and cuts. A closer inspection of the injured kunoichi revealed the contours of her stomach showing through her baggy cloak, and Jiraiya sighed. Pregnant at that age, they just get younger and younger. Tears began falling down his face as he looked towards the sky. Why couldn't girls be this loose when I was a Jinan? I would have been smart enough to pull out at least. The sage ended his rant and gently cradled the girl's body as he blurred away, just before being engulfed by a large steel net. It snaked back into the thick weeds, then two shinobi emerged from them. They wore the same outfits as the cronies who were with Kabuto when he captured Tsunade-san's masks, probably because they wouldn't need them in their own country. The one holding the net was rather skinny and on the tall side, probably a couple of inches taller than Jiraiya. He was bald with an ashy complexion, and had a large stitch-shaped scar that started next to his right eye and wrapped under his narrow jaw. The net swung lazily while his beady black eyes stared down the living legend. The other one had wild black hair that covered his ears, slitted green eyes, and two scars the shape of fangs on his cheeks. He moved his clawed hands, revealing the scratched-out leaf headband embedded in his chest plate, and pointed the dangerous appendages at Jiraiya. Not bad, old man. But I don't feel like wasting any more time, so just hand over the bitch. Jiraiya feigned hurt as he carefully adjusted the girl so she was resting over his shoulder. You're from Konoha, you work for Orochimaru, and somehow you don't know who I am. Allow me to fix that. The toad summoner lamented he couldn't do his usual dance because of his cargo, but decided to make the best of it. After all, it's not every day a world-famous man gets to introduce himself to someone. A legendary sage, feared by the unjust and loved by the righteous. He simply appears and the women swoon. Evil men cower in fear and jealousy because of his terrible might. I am the protector of the weak, upholder of justice, the gallant. The fair old man let out a roar and charged the Sennin with his partner as a dog leapt out from the grass behind him. I don't care who you are, just die. Jiraiya bit his thumb, made four hand signs so fast and fluently that the girl didn't even shift on his shoulders. The men had no time to react as he slammed his bloody palm to the ground while saying, Kushios, Yatai Kuzushi no Jutsu. Summoning, food cart destroyer, Jiraiya disappeared and the charging men stopped their attack and looked up to see a cloud of smoke through which a large, green, and warty posterior was rapidly falling. The former Konoha shinobi finally realized why the old guy was so familiar just as the ass of a toad ended his life. Jiraiya dismissed his summon and frowned at the three bloody and mangled corpses in the crater. You didn't even let me finish. That was a really good one too. I should definitely put that in the next installment of Icha Icha. The buzz from the alcohol was fading, so Jiraiya brought the next bottle out and popped the cork before taking a better look at the girl on his shoulder. Now what's so special about you that Orochimaru would send an Inuzuka to hunt you down? The toad sage felt he had a pretty good idea as he made his way to a nearby safe house, confident that nobody, save his ex-teammate, had a hope of following. The first coherent thought in Kin's head was that she was far comfier than she had ever been at the base and was surrounded by warmth. The kunoichi thought she was dead and panic set in. Her eyes shot open and she let out a groan because of the bright light pouring in through the open window. To make matters worse, somebody started playing the drums in her head while every move made her body cry out in pain. "Nope, I'm definitely alive." A boisterous laugh rang out and the girl winced because it caused her headache to spike. "You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not. Could you just keep it down a little bit?" replied Kin as she hissed in pain. The voice got much quieter before saying, "Sorry, I forgot what it feels like to have chakra exhaustion. Before you go back to sleep, try to eat and drink. I've left some nutritious food and some cold water on the table to your left. I managed to feed you a little when we got here, but the baby needs more." The last few days came rushing back to Kin as she slowly opened her eyes to adjust to the light. In the far corner of the room sat a man at a desk wearing a red vest and green long-sleeve shirt with thick white hair spilling down his back. "Thank you, but why did you help me? Who are you?" He turned around, revealing a kind face, and gave her a gentle smile. "Some kind of man I would be if I just left a damsel in distress." He deflected her other questions as he placed the tray in front of her. "My friend is a great medic and I know chakra exhaustion while pregnant isn't a good thing. Now eat up and sleep because you must be exhausted still. When you're ready to travel, I'll bring you to my village." Kin knew the kind old man was right and mumbled another thank you before digging into the steaming bowl of hearty soup and warm bread before letting a peaceful sleep take her. Team Naruto had managed to navigate the mines and get to the designated supply closet with no incident. Currently, the captain of said team was trying not to enjoy his position so much that he would be unable to react quickly enough. Tamari was pressed tightly up against his back and he could feel her breasts move against him whenever she shifted positions. The older blonde was pushing him into Sakura and he was trying his hardest not to move so he didn't accidentally poke her. Sai stood in the corner staring at the doorway with a scroll of ink beasts easily accessible. The blonde definitely didn't plan it. It just so happened that Sakura needed to be closest to the door to move first and he had to go out quickly to get the target. And he didn't really want Sai pressing into him like Tamari was. Suddenly Naruto's blue eye shot open as he got his Cage Bunshine's memory. The blonde's creative mind worked frantically as he whispered, "Shit, follow my lead. Sai, smoke bombs. Sakura, prepare me a kunai with an exploding tag, then get out some poison gas. Tamari, get a jutsu ready." He could clearly see the questions on their faces, but his tone told them there was no time to ask, so they carried out the assigned tasks quickly. Naruto cleared himself some room before forming several hand seals. He held the last one and inhaled deeply while counting in his head. When it reached 0, he exhaled and launched the Guko at the door. It smashed into the wooden portal, making it shatter into splinters, and before the shrapnel hit the other side of the hallway, Sakura had the kunai in his hands. Sai figured that was his cue and launched the smoke bombs, filling the hallway and closet with thick, gray smoke. Naruto yelled out, "Go, left!" And the three Genin burst from the closet and he quickly followed after coating the prepared kunai with wind chakra. When the Chunin exited the room, he threw it into the floor and activated the tag just as Sakura launched her gas bombs. A small explosion ripped through the hallway, spreading the poison, and Tamari launched a wave of wind right after Naruto got behind her, keeping them safe from the fumes while sending them back towards their pursuers. They started rushing through the hallways while the old lights in the mines flickered after the blast. Naruto drifted to the back while saying, "Sakura, take the lead?" "What? Why?" questioned the pinkhead in a hesitant voice. He gave her a comforting smile that calmed her nerves. "Because I'm sure you know exactly where we are and I have no idea." Now it was her turn to smile and she gave him a confident nod before dashing ahead, and Naruto fell to the back of the group while digging in his pack. He let out a triumphant shout and held up a roll of prepared tripwires before rifling through tightly bound groups. He yanked the short wires out of the bundle, the ones made for trapping the tightest spaces, before stuffing the rest back in his pack haphazardly. This was reminding him of the chases from his pranking days, so he thought it was a good time to use some old, reliable tricks. Usually his pursuers would rush blindly ahead, not assuming he would have traps because he appeared to be blindly rushing for his freedom. But he was a clever child, even if they never called him smart, and would plan out his escape routes before his pranks. The blonde would spend hours, sometimes days if it was worth it, secretly setting up traps so he could quickly finish them while running away and leave surprises for his pursuers set up in his wake. Unfortunately, he didn't have any prepared, but that could be even better because his victims wouldn't expect it at all. The Jinchuriki began coating the kunai with wind chakra and randomly set the wires up, not caring which tags were tied around them. He was a little miffed about it too because he spent hours organizing them carefully since all the people he knew insisted that it was important to have things like that set up and organized. Well, Uzumaki Naruto won, everybody else overprepared dumbass. The shinobi rounded the next corner and saw a wall of at least 30 men blocking their way before another 20 came out from the hallway on their right. They closed in menacingly with weapons drawn, each step shutting potential escape routes. Before any of the ninja could prepare a jutsu to break the lines, a bright flash of light went off before a sharp blast of sound cracked in the passageway behind them. Sakura turned and led Team Naruto in a hasty retreat while its captain left several tripwires for their pursuers. It was a good thing too because they didn't get very far before 6 cloaked men rolled out of hidden compartments carved into the ceiling, wielding long kunai knives. They wasted no time and launched themselves at their younger opponents. Tamari pulled out 2 small fans and began spinning around and swinging them wildly. There was a method to her madness though, as 2 of the attackers were killed or mortally wounded by crescents of wind while some had shallow wounds, but their attack was stopped and the initiative stolen. Sai used the time to summon ink lions that quickly attacked the 4 flunkies, and the shinobi used that distraction to finish them quickly. Unfortunately, it wasn't quick enough because several men appeared from either end of the hall, trapping them once more. Naruto formed some cage bunshines and they rushed at the group in front of them, supported by more ink animals courtesy of Sai. The clones leapt at the men while forming Rasengans. In response, the front row planted their pikes, hoping to stop the blonde projectiles. They did manage to dispel some, but the swirling balls of chakra shred most of the flimsy weapons and armor, killing many. The remaining bunshines and ink animals leapt over the melee in the first row and began to sow chaos in the enemy ranks. What was once a tightly packed score of men in formation was now a disorganized mess, and a Daikamaitachi from Tamari managed to clear the hall. Naruto left behind some shadow clones to discourage pursuit and set up some more wires as they kept running into a large room filled with tables. Suddenly metal gates swung open at the tops of the large arches that led to the exit, revealing more hidden cubbies and ambushers. One man in the arches would throw a steel rope to the one across from him and they all unrolled to the floor, revealing it to be a net of meshed barbed wire. Suddenly more men came from the hallways and anchored the bottom of the nets, trapping the team inside. The shinobi looked around frantically before Tamari growled with frustration, "What the hell? I come on 2 missions with you guys and have to deal with all this bullshit. I went on 10 times the amount of missions in Suna and saw less action on all of them combined than just one of these. I've had enough." She pulled out her 2 handheld fans and they began to glow blue with chakra. "Which way, Sakura?" She timidly pointed to the one on her left, and Tamari turned a full spin and swung one fan vertically and one horizontally, sending 2 perpendicular blades of wind at the net. They easily cut through it and the 2 men anchoring in the hallway, giving them an exit. Team Naruto quickly went that way, and some well-placed poison bombs by the team's medic made sure the men in the cubbies wouldn't stop them. Naruto looked at constantly flickering light at the end of the tunnel and saw that it stayed lit for almost 3 seconds before flashing again. Except this time it was in half-second intervals. Testing a theory, he ordered, "Switch exits, Sakura, make it obvious." She gave him a strange look over her shoulder, "But we're almost there. Just do it," he responded sharply. She didn't ask another question, and as they made the next turn he watched the lights at the end of the hallway. They once again stopped flickering for about 3 seconds before taking on a 3-second interval between flashes. "Now go towards the exit we were heading for after we got trapped in the mess hall." He could see that the pink hat wanted to ask, but he didn't have time and she didn't want to get snapped at again, so made the turn. Once again it paused for 3 seconds before flickering every half second. "Damn it, they somehow know where we are and when we change directions. The lights are a signal." Sakura's face lit up in understanding. "But how do they know?" "It doesn't matter," said Tamari. "We just need to get out of here." Naruto nodded in agreement. "Just take us to the main exit in the most direct route possible, Sakura. We're just going to have to muscle our way through." "They know Raiga, they're going straight for the waste dump," the man growled as soon as Ranmaru's soft voice finished. "Damn it, it's so hard to find good help." He took his charged fang off the severed wire tied into the main power grid before flashing it several times in the appropriate order. "Okay, everybody knows, but unfortunately we can't count on them, Ranmaru. We'll have to do it together." The lavender-haired boy poked his head out of the bundle of cloth that was his cocoon and gave Raiga an affectionate smile. "Because I'm your eyes. And I'm your legs," responded Raiga mechanically. He automatically returned the smile after he finished, but it lacked the warmth of the boys on his back. He started off, but as soon as he opened the door to his private chamber he was confronted by the icy stare of Kimimaro. "What is going on?" Raiga just waved him off. "Nothing really, just some uninvited guests that we prepared some surprises for." The pale teen stoically lifted an eyebrow. "And you didn't think it prudent to tell me?" Raiga gave him a stiff bow. "Forgive me. I didn't think such a nuisance should be the concern of an agent of Orochimaru's. I'm going to handle it myself now. I have my most expendable men giving chase while my more capable ones are in ambush spots or preparing the sealed gold for shipment. I'm about to go greet our guests personally and then we can leave with the gold if that pleases you." Kimimaro just walked away dismissively. "Do what you want, we leave on my signal whether you're here or not." Raiga just grit his teeth as the Kaguya walked away. "Little punk. Just wait till Orochimaru gives me my reward, then we'll see who's higher on the food chain, you freak." The former hunter stopped watching Kimimaro's back and began to stalk his real prey. The door swung open and smashed into the stone wall, causing the wood to split and splinter. The guard defensively held a 10-inch kunai in front of him, a sign he was an elite among the Kurasuki. He tried to hide the nervous shaking of his knees as the sound of footsteps echoed around the corner. The cowardly guard almost sagged to his knees in relief when the person who appeared matched the description, a description filled with insults and curses, given by Raiga. Knowing that if he didn't obey this person's command he would be having a premature funeral, the guard scrambled to attention. "What do you need, sir?" The white-haired man ignored him and walked past him to the vault door, and the guard quickly turned and scrambled to follow. The pale shinobi just stood there tapping his foot, and eventually the hapless sentry took the hint and opened it. "Is everything ready for transport?" Taken aback by the suddenness of the command and the power behind it, he stuttered out, "Why yes, everything is sealed and safely packed." Kimimaro ignored the man while other guards and few Uinjutsu users gathered around and watched with sick fascination as the fanatic grabbed his left hand, right above the wrist, and began to pull. The joint let loose several sick popping and squelching sounds before it ripped from his arm. The shinobi didn't let loose a sound during the process and dropped the dismembered body part as a new hand began to grow in place of the old one. The Kurosaki henchman just stared mutely in awe and horror for a couple of minutes until the hand was regrown. The bizarre shinobi then picked his dismembered hand off the ground before grabbing it with his new one and holding it like he was shaking the owner hand. The men thought it couldn't get any stranger, but from the back of the amputated hand sprouted the radius and ulna bones. They continued to extend from the hand, and muscle and skin slowly grew to cover it. After the shoulder joint was formed, it branched off to all the connected bones and continued to expand. The larger it got, the faster it grew, but the ninja was obviously exhausted and he was barely halfway done with his creation. The bones stopped growing, but the skin and muscle continued to creep up and cover it. However, no organs or body systems were created besides the skeletal and muscular. The creation would be fueled by chakra alone. Unfortunately, Kimimaro had poured over 3/4 of his natural chakra pool into it, and only the head and left arm were fully formed. The left leg was only beginning to grow and the right side of the torso was still forming as well. Luckily, the Kaguya had a second source of chakra he could call on in the marks of his earth seal, thin lines that formed something like the diagram of an electrical circuit, spread across his skin. A thick, malevolent chakra began to foul up the room and the thugs fell to the ground, gasping for air. Kimimaro paid them no heed as the body continued to grow, but still not fast enough. He powered up to his level 2 form and the speed quadrupled as his clone took on the same changes as him. Eventually he was shaking hands with his exact copy, and as he powered down, the curse seal chakra contained itself on the clone in a replica of Kimimaro's curse seal, but it was more like a storage seal in design. This was the most hidden technique of the Kaguya clan, mainly because so few had the chakra to complete the procedure. To create one clone, a group of high-level clan members with similar chakra signatures, usually family members, pooled their chakra together. Even then, many strong Kaguya had died during the process. It created an exact copy that was capable of any Shikatsu Myaku dance, dead bone pulse. It possessed upwards of 90% of his chakra, including the curse seal, and could be controlled from up to a mile away. The technique's biggest weakness was a delay that could be taken advantage of by opponents of the same skill level. The only time the clan ever really used it was for incredibly dangerous assassination missions or gathering information on an exceptionally deadly opponent. The results usually weren't worth the sacrifice, but this time it would allow him to personally guard the gold and keep abreast of the situation. Kimimaro ignored the gasping guards, and one who lay unconscious in a puddle of his own vomit, as he sat in a lotus position to form the connection with his creation. As he closed his green eyes, the clone opened its pair, revealing the exact same icy stare before stalking into the hallway. Nobody had interrupted Team Naruto's progress through the tunnels since figuring out how they communicated, so their pursuers were obviously preparing an ambush. That's why it wasn't a surprise when Naruto felt something in his stomach and grabbed Sakura's elbow before she turned into the next hallway and a literal river of lightning poured down the corridor. Naruto stepped out ahead of his team and launched a date-op to block any follow-up attack, and they took off into an adjoining hallway. Raiga let out a scream of frustration after the wind blast subsided as Ranmaru scanned the area they ran into. Go straight and take the third left. Now Naruto led the group while staying on the lookout for any sign of Raiga. Temari let out a yelp and he turned his head to see a ball of lighting as wide as the passageway hurtling towards them. The sandy blonde threw open her fan and countered with a quick Kamaitachi, but the lightning jutsu proved to be more powerful and was only weakened by the move. However, it did buy Naruto enough time to launch another Daitapa that was able to scatter the remaining lightning. They took the closest side passage once again and Ranmaru immediately said, "Right." Naruto had his sharingan out and it span rapidly as he scanned everyone's chakra to see if the man had done something to detect it. He was at his wit's end because every way they went was blocked off and eventually they wouldn't be able to break through the enemy line, but even a sensor wouldn't be able to pick the tunnel so perfectly, so there had to be some trick. The blonde let out a sigh because everyone's chakra was the same as always, but the Dujutsu did allow him to see the residual waves of chakra emanating from the corner in front of them. The Chunin gripped his blade and pulled it out just in time to parry a sword covered in lightning. The man tried to use the extension on the tip of his blade to disarm Naruto, but he was able to maneuver his shorter weapon out of the joint before it could get caught. The blonde then slashed at Raiga's head and the more experienced swordsman easily backstepped the strike. The wide slash was a feint though, and the chakra blade left behind a thick wall of white ash that blocked the swordsman's vision. Despite that, he was able to dodge Sakura's senbon needles like he knew where they were. Before Raiga could launch one of his deadly lightning jutsu to counter, he moved his sword to stab a charging Ink Lion and Team Naruto retreated down the hallway before cutting to the left. The blonde sheathed his sword and bit his thumb, waiting for the next encounter, and sure enough another river of lightning was barreling at them from behind. Naruto turned 180 degrees as he made 4 quicken seals and slammed his bloody palm on the ground when he completed the turn, Kushios no Jutsu. A shield dot appeared in a puff of smoke and saw the approaching threat. It croaked and launched a large ball of water that absorbed the lightning attack and continued on its path. Raiga cursed and ducked behind the corner and charged up his fangs to catch any residual lightning spread after the ball splashed into the wall. When he came back around, he was staring at a heavily armored horned purple toad that was much taller than he was. It had 2 large, circular shields that were studded with inch-long spikes on each forearm, and it appeared the edges were sharpened as well. Naruto stared awkwardly at the toad, slightly embarrassed that he didn't know its name. "I'm sorry for summoning you like that, but do you think you could maybe stall this guy? Not for long, but we need a little breathing room to get out." It croaked in agreement before facing the swordsman. "Great, I'll ask someone what I should get you later." Confident in his summons ability, Naruto led his team towards the exit after creating a horde of clones to clear the way. It wasn't long before they could taste the sweet air, and the 4 ninja avoided the bodies of men as they leapt onto the side of the mountain. They didn't even get halfway down when another ball of lightning rushed down the mountainside before exploding when it got close to them. The shinobi leapt off the rock to dodge and use the debris to get back to the mountain, but they were facing a very angry Raiga who had several slices and puncture wounds on him. "I swear I'm going to hunt that annoying frog down and give it a funeral, but for now, you'll do." Naruto just gave the man a cheeky grin. "First of all, it's a toad, and secondly, I told it to stall you and not beat you because I wanted to say we beat a 7 swordsmen of the mist ourselves after fighting Zabuzai and Nami no Kuni." Raiga grit his teeth at the insolent remark, but before he could say anything, the blonde with her hair in 4 pigtails cut in. "He's wasn't a swordsman, Naruto. Remember, it said he stole the swords and ran in the bingo book." "Shut up. I never wanted to be in the same group with assholes like Zabuzai and Kisame anyways." Raiten, Raikyu. Lightning ball. Raiga's eyes gleamed with rage as he launched his jutsu at the 4 nats who didn't have the decency to die. He'd take their bodies with him and give them a special funeral that he could really enjoy. The lightning ball forced the 4 shinobi to scatter, and Raiga made his next move, Kirigakure no Jutsu. "Do you really think numbers mean anything in this situation?" After the missing nin finished setting up the jutsu, Ranmaru whispered from his carrier on the man's back, "There's one directly below us on the cliff wall, 2 are at 3 and 4 o'clock, and 1 is trying to get above us on our left." Raiga grunted the affirmative and stabbed his glowing swords into the cliff face as they sparked with electrical energy. Reizo, Ikazuchi no Utage. Lightning burial, banquet of lightning. Lightning crackled between the fangs and a miniature storm of lightning surrounded the swordsman. He lifted his arms and laughed maniacally as the electricity branched out in the 4 directions indicated, and the glorious screams of pain echoed out, except the one voice rose that above them, "Futon, Sensuguaki." Rumbling wind wall. Raiga looked up to see the mist swirling around a figure and let out a frustrated growl, but before he could follow up, Ranmaru said, "Move." He knew better than to question the boy and leapt from his position just as a gas bomb exploded, releasing noxious purple fumes. The former hunter turned around and saw that the pink-haired girl was flying on some type of bird with the pale kid while the blonde girl was gliding on her fan holding two small handheld ones. Ryaga formed a Raikou between his blades and took aim at the bird while letting out an insane yell, "I hate pale people." The bird managed to dodge, but he didn't care and let loose a steady stream of the blasts, forcing the bird to take further evasive actions, but it left him wide open for a counterattack. Incoming. Once again the missing nin was forced to abandon his position as two blades of wind left deep gouges in the rock. Raiga faced upwards to see several copies of the blonde boy launching air bullets at him, so he began running laterally on the cliff face. He managed to slow down or speed up whenever a bullet was about to hit him. The volley stopped for a moment and the crazed swordsman charged up a large Raikou. He threw it in the middle of the clones, and before it hit the cliff the ball burst into dozens of streams of lightning that dispelled all the bunshines, but there was no sign of the real blonde. Suddenly Ranmaru said, "He's inside the mountain." Raiga stopped the flow of chakra to his feet and fell just as the mountainside exploded outward and the blonde Chunin emerged holding a blue ball of swirling chakra. The teen stared down at him with mismatched eyes as the debris exploded out around him. The man dropped about 20 yards before reattaching his feet, but as he was still sliding the Chunin was upon him wielding that white, glowing blade. "Pick it up, Ranmaru," harshly commanded Raiga. The feeble boy timidly mumbled an apology as Naruto stopped running and stabbed. Raiga simply slid out of range before overloading his feet with chakra and launching himself at the charging shinobi. The white blade made a wide slashing arc from the left, leaving a glowing trail, but the lightning-charged fang blocked it. The blonde sword then extended as he slid the length of it along Raiga's and stabbed. Raiga was forced to disengage and spin to his left lest the blade stab through his head. Still the Chunin's knee slammed into his ribs and Raiga grunted as he completed his turn. He then swiped his blades in an X pattern, launching two arcs of lightning at the descending boy, forcing him to stop his attack and leap to the side. The X-carry shinobi took advantage and charged Naruto, making several sweeping slashes that forced the boy back up the cliff. The Jinchuriki leapt to the side and Raiga lifted his swords as they let out a small storm of lightning that stopped the Senbone rushing at him. He looked up to see the kid's pink-haired teammate had thrown pellets all around him while his vision was blocked by the swords and he was forced to backflip away from the cliff face. Ranmaru shouted a warning as Raiga was flipping and he craned his neck to see the pale kid swooping in on his black and white bird as he launched a barrage of shuriken at the Rogan. The ex-hunter simply contorted his body around most of the projectiles and blocked what he had to. As Raiga completed the flip, his boots landed on Sai's bird and the swordsman pushed off while slashing through its neck, destroying the creature. He landed safely on the cliff and watched while the pale boy fell, hopefully to his doom. It wasn't to be, however, as the annoying blonde rat threw a kunai attached to a long strand of ninja wire towards the knee operative, who grabbed it and swung back to the cliff as well. The missing nin turned to see the real Chunin was charging down the mountainside with the pink-haired girl hot on his heels. Raiga squared up to the assaulting shinobi and braced himself as he met their bull rush head-on. The blonde led off with an overhead slash that forced Raiga to block with his left blade, and the girl came under the boy's outstretched arm so the carry native couldn't use his right sword. She sent a glowing palm at Raiga's left shoulder, so he disengaged and tried to slash at the girl, but she stopped and her blonde teammate sped past her. The older shinobi changed his angle and instead slashed at Naruto's right leg. The boy simply kept his blade on the inside of the strike and swung it in a vertical, upwards arc as he charged Raiga. The swordsman lifted an eyebrow because the attack would have no chance of landing before his, but the white trail left behind deflected the lightning-covered fang. Raiga's eyes widened as he just managed to get his other blade up to slightly deflect the attack, but it left a scratch just above his right eye that immediately began leaking blood into the purple orb. Raiga delivered a devastating headbutt in retaliation that resulted in a satisfying crack, and the assaulting boy let out a cry of pain as he lost control of his chakra and slid down the face of the mountain. Naruto managed to catch himself by coating his free hand in chakra, but Raiga already launched a Raikou at the helpless blonde. He watched the descending ball, but a Daikamaitachi, courtesy of Tamari, impacted the attack and forced it to smash into the mountainside. Raiga let loose a howl of fury and tried to rush the Sunakunoichi, but found he couldn't move his legs. He looked down to see that nearly a dozen black snakes have constricted around his legs and anchored themselves to the cliff face. The Kurosuke boss turned his head around to see the blonde rushing at him holding that deadly ball of chakra once again. But before it could grind through his torso, a pale hand caught the outstretched wrist and turned the jutsu into the mountainside, utterly destroying it. Naruto followed the arm up to the owner's face, the same face that took a Rasengan head-on and came back unscathed. His blue and red eyes widened in surprise. "You?" The teenager's green eyes narrowed sharply and the red dots above his eyes shifted together as he looked at the blonde. The bone wielder threw him off the side of the mountain, but Naruto simply made a cross-shaped seal and used the clone that popped into existence to get back to the face safely. He looked up at the dangerous ninja and took in the changes. He was no longer wearing a hospital robe but had on a loose lavender zip-up shirt and the sleeves came down to cover his hands. He wore a lavender bow around his waist, just like Tuya had when they captured her, and black pants that stopped mid-shin. There was also a strange seal on his chest that appeared to be three fangs grouped together. One was vertical, the other two horizontal with about an inch between the ends. The bone user shifted his gaze to Raga before looking back at Naruto. "You're lucky I got here in time. You wouldn't have gotten up from that jutsu. I had it handled," replied Raga angrily. "Not from where I was watching." Taking advantage of their distraction, Naruto used the Guko and launched a barrage of air bullets that destroyed the rock under Kimimara's feet. He then launched several more at the descending teen so the deadly shinobi couldn't get a foothold and climb back up. He then looked at his teammates. "Listen, that guy's on a completely different level and we can't handle them both at the same time. You guys stay here and deal with him, I'll stall the pale one." Sakura frowned and looked down the mountain through the thick fog. "Are you sure? One of us can come too." Tamari looked like she wanted to agree but Sai answered for his captain, "No, Raga isn't enough of a pushover that two of us can safely take him. Naruto has obviously seen that man before and has the perfect jutsu for stalling. We'll just have to finish up here quickly." Naruto gave his male teammate an appreciative nod before saying, "Sai's right, I trust you guys will wrap things up and come help me out. Tamari, you're in charge so keep them safe." The other blonde nodded and Naruto started running towards the Kaguya. He found Kimimaro waiting on a wide plateau carved into the mountain watching his descent, almost eagerly. The cliff ended and the plateau extended nearly 300 feet before sharply dropping again. It was about 75 feet wide, but on either side there was a steep incline, much like the one Naruto ran down. The surface was jagged and uneven with piles of boulders were stacked all over it. The whole thing looked like some type of behemoth had taken a bite from the mountain itself. Naruto landed softly and drew his sword before taking a ready position as he faced the bone user. "What does Orochimaru want here?" Kimimaro lifted his palm and held it towards Naruto. "That's no concern of trash like you. Now we didn't get properly acquainted last time so I would like to show you a specialty of mine. Tsubaki no Mai. Dance of the Camellia." His palm split open as a pointed bone protruded from his skin and a blade followed. It extended outwards until what looked like a handle appeared and it detached as the hole sealed itself quickly. His weapon appeared to be about the size of Naruto's and he held it with the ease of an expert. "This is my bloodline, Shikatsu Myaku. It allows me to control my skeletal system and make my bones as hard as diamonds. Now, let us begin." He seemed to disappear and Naruto could barely raise his blade to block the bone, but the pale teen was undeterred and spun to deliver a brutal kick to the blonde's midsection that sent him tumbling head over heels. It felt like a sledgehammer hit his ribs where Kimimaro's shin made contact. Luckily Naruto was able to hold onto the blade because he used it to divert the bone sword so the tip only pierced the hard stone, not his head. The blonde scrambled to roll away, but Kimimaro delivered another kick to his midsection before he was clear. Naruto was already moving away from the strike so he was able to absorb most of it and regain his feet. This time when Kimimaro attacked he was able to duck under the slash and stab towards the bone user, but a sharp dipped bone sprouted from the Kaguya's elbow when Naruto got behind his defense before retracting itself. The Konoha ninja fell to the ground and rolled out of the range of those deadly legs. The blonde regained his feet and braced for an attack, but his opponent was just standing lazily. Naruto made a cross-shaped seal and summoned 8 Kage Bunshin that all said, "Don't underestimate me." 4 charged with their blades ready while 4 stayed back and Kimimaro just gave a cocky smirk and walked towards them calmly while saying, "If this is all you're capable of I don't need to try." The white-haired teen burst into motion when he finished and stopped one clone's attack by grabbing its wrist and threw it at another, dispelling them both. He then opened his palm as he flicked his wrist and the hilt of the bone sword spun rapidly before he took it in the backhand grip, pivoted, and impaled one Naruto in the face who was approaching from the rear. He then flipped over the last clone's lunging stab and threw his bone saber into the back of its neck. He then looked around to see the 4 remaining Narutos had surrounded him and the bones in the tips of his fingers poked out of the skin. Dashi Sendan. 10-finger drilling bullets, he spun a full circle while firing a few bones at each clone. The projectiles moved so fast the copies had not time to react and were all dispelled. Suddenly 10 more Kage Bunshin popped into existence on the outcroppings of rock surrounding Kimimaro, holding swirling balls of wind the size of a basketball in front of them. Futon, Satadungan. Bullet rush, each ball split into 25, arrow-like projectiles each, and Kimimaro was surrounded by 250 of the wind bullets. They launched at him in waves of 50 in an attempt to inflict damage faster than he could heal. The seal on the Kaguya's chest pulsed and spikes of bone exploded from the ground around him, providing protection from the barrage. He emerged from the bones like they were water while holding a new blade. Is this really all you can muster? 9 of the Narutos rushed Kimimaro with an angry scream, and when they got close the exploding tags stuck to their clothes detonated. The Kaguya was engulfed in the smoke and fire created by the explosion. When the dust settled nearly half a minute later, many pieces of Kimimaro's bones and muscle were visible. Even his teeth could be seen through his torn cheek. But all the burns and lacerations from shrapnel were in the process of healing, and Naruto cursed. This guy was kicking his ass like Uegao did, and the blonde wasn't just limited to Kenjutsu either. He hated to do it, but he was going to have to use the Kyuubi's chakra. Not enough to create a shroud because he would still need the Sharingan to have any hope of keeping up, but still enough that his speed and strength would be increased to the point that most Jounin would have to try to be able to match it. The bone user watched with interest as the Chunin's remaining blue eye turned red, except unlike the deep ruby of the Sharingan, it was a blood red. The pupil then became slit like a predator, and the markings on his cheeks got darker and wider. The blonde's fingernails turned to claws and his canines jutted from his mouth, causing Kimimaro's eyebrow to lift in curiosity. Apparently Konoha had something like a curse seal too. You may think you're special, but you're not the only one. It still doesn't matter though, as you are, it wouldn't be a challenge to leave you dead among the stones. Raiga stared angrily at the area where Naruto and Kimimaro went, and the Jounin took advantage of this time to regroup. Tamari looked at their opponent and put her sharp mind to work almost instantly, analyzing him closely. The man's most glaring weakness was the blood pouring into his left eye, and the fact that his primary element was weak against hers. However, the swordsman was more experienced and probably had several jutsu that could overpower any of Tamari's. To make matters worse, Raiga was somehow able to easily dodge and anticipate attacks he couldn't see, so neither of those could be counted on. The swordsman also had several long-range, wide-area jutsu that his blades allowed him to utilize almost instantaneously, which gave him the ability to switch between close and long range instantly. Coupled it with his uncanny ability to locate them wherever they were made him a dangerous opponent no matter how approached. Raiga's biggest downfall was his apparent instability. At first Tamari was wary because elite ninja will often use mind games like that to mess with opponents, but this guy wasn't acting, or somewhere along the line he started to live his role. The swordsman was prone to fits of rage and insanity, and that was never good when you needed to stay calm to analyze the battle. He should have attacked Tamari at the start of the fight when she was gliding on her fan. Instead, his anger and apparent hatred of his commander caused him to go after Sai, the more elusive target, because his mind linked them together due to their skin tone. He was also throwing around jutsu like crazy since the start to keep up with their coordinated assault, so fatigue was definitely a factor. It only took a few seconds for Tamari to process all of that and come up with a plan before she relayed it to Sakura and Sai. Alright, here's how we're going to do this. Sakura, you're the only thing resembling a short-range fighter on the team now, so you'll be the closest, but don't directly engage him and always keep a buffer zone between you guys. Sai, you'll fly distraction. He hates you because you remind him of that other guy, so make sure you stay his main focus. Also take some poison bombs with you. The NI agent grabbed some pellets from Sakura as Tamari continued laying out her plan. He has the high ground, but that isn't necessarily an advantage in this situation. The smoke from Sakura's bombs will rise and we can use that. I want you to pepper him with senbon and spread out the poison until it forms a wall in front of Raiga. When I think it's big enough, Sai will throw his bombs above him on my signal, and once he's contained I'll use my fan to overwhelm him with the smoke. He'll have to leave the mountain face or inhale the poison, and that will be our best chance. Sakura, try to hit his landing area with more gas. I'll try to blow him away from the mountain, and Sai can use his ink birds to attack as well. As soon as she finished, Raiga turned his angry glare to them and Tamari nudged Sai with her foot. He gave the man a fake smile while saying, "Do you think we could hurry this up? I don't want to get down and the sun is coming out." Sakura just stared blankly at Sai. He can get her and Naruto to want to kill him easily. How they even planned out where to hide the body once. Or future reference. Still, that was the best he could come up with. The medic turned to face their opponent, and to her amazement he looked furious. The man crossed his blades while lifting them above his to the sky and shouted in rage, "I'm going to crucify you above the cloud line and come back in a week just to see your sunburned skin." Ikazuchi no Kiba, fangs of lightning. Apparently Sai just knew what to say to get under people's skin because lightning exploded upwards from the man's swords. He began laughing psychotically. Bolts of lightning began raining down from the sky towards the three Jounin. Sakura and Tamari began running all over the cliff face, barely avoiding the strikes, while Sai jumped on the bird he summoned earlier before opening a new scroll and placing exploding tags on his drawings. Several smaller birds then rose up with the tags on their backs and dive-bombed their insane opponent. Raiga's lightning managed to destroy most of the IEDs that were launched towards him, except for one that hit the mountainside by his feet and detonated. The smoke from the explosion engulfed the Nuke-Nin, but he never fell or emerged from the thick, black cloud. When the smoke cleared, the swordsman was shrouded in a protective layer of lightning, several feet below his previous position, Raigeki no Yoroi. Lightning strike armor, his coating of lightning raced up his body before forming a large ball between his swords that he launched at Sai. Sakura threw a poison bomb at his position, which forced him to dodge before launching another IQ. Raiga used one of his swords to block several senbon that she followed up with, then lazily sliced his sword upwards and a crescent of lightning raced towards Sakura. She easily dodged, but a faster one was heading right for her and she hadn't landed yet. Fortunately, Tamari had the younger girl covered and a blast of wind dissipated the attack. Raiga quickly turned to face the Sunakunoichi, but before she could draw his ire it started raining ink mice on him. The swordsman looked up to see the kid on the bird flying overhead and shouted in frustration, "Get down here, I want to kill you the most." Raiga tried to launch another attack at his aerial opponent, but a warning from Ranmaru had him dodging another poison gas and senbon barrage. When he landed, the green-haired swordsman was forced to roll the other way as an arc of wind sliced through the rock he was just standing on. He managed to get a lightning crescent off in response, but more exploding birds were chasing him and that damn bubblegum ninja kept throwing poison everywhere. Suddenly the furious assault was cut off and Raiga looked down the mountain to see a thick wall of yellow smoke. Right behind the wall was the Kunoichi with the fan, and she was preparing an attack, a futon attack. The ex-Kirin may have more than a few screws loose, but he was still able to put 2 and 2 together and get 4 9 out of 10 times. Thus he was able to tell what was coming next and tried to retreat up the mountain. The pale bastard had other ideas though and threw more poison bombs in his path, cutting the retreating shinobi off. Raiga turned around to see the rapidly approaching wall of poison and screamed in defiance as he lifted his fangs. The heavens boomed and answered his call. A bolt of lightning struck Raiga and formed a pillar around his body before he began spinning. The electricity surrounding him formed a twister that pushed the gas away, but that was only the first part of the attack. A dragon's head formed at the top of it and it rushed down the mountain towards the fan-wielding Kunoichi. Tamari thought the shinobi was going to jump and was braced for her next attack, not set to dodge. She watched helplessly as the elemental dragon obliterated the rock beneath it and rushed towards her with its jaws gaping. The blonde tried to move and avoid the jutsu, but the beast was too wide and she wouldn't be able to make it. The Sunajinon closed her eyes and waited for it to end. Her only regret was that she wouldn't be able to deepen her relationship with Gaara now that he was open to the idea. Suddenly the air was knocked out of her and Tamari opened her eyes to see nothing but pink. The wind began whipping past them and blew the hair out of her face and she realized Sakura had tackled her off the mountain. The blonde raised her voice over the howling wind to question the younger girl. "Why? Now we're both going to die." Sakura let out a helpless laugh. "We're teammates now and the first lesson we learned on our first day was to never abandon a comrade. There was a chance I could have saved you so I took it." Tamari had no answer so just squeezed the pink head tighter and Sakura returned the gesture. Suddenly an ear-splitting screech drowned out the wind for a brief moment and the girls turned to see Sai in a nosedive on top of his bird. Tamari squeezed her left arm around Sakura tighter and reached her right towards the pale artist's extended hand. She stretched as far as possible but just couldn't reach their salvation. Sakura began shifting in the blonde's arms and suddenly Tamari felt the girl heave upwards and she was able to grab Sai's wrist, but the pinkette pushed herself out of the Sunakunoichi's grasp, began falling faster as a result of her action. The sandy blonde let out a desperate cry and Sakura smiled sadly as she fell. Suddenly Sai pulled out a scroll and propelled himself off the diving bird as it pulled out of the dive. The extra speed he gained from the maneuver allowed the boy to catch up to his tumbling teammate. He wrapped his arms around the pink head and unrolled the scroll, flooding the first drawing on it with chakra and managed to summon another bird. Once they were secure on its back, the animated drawing flew them away from the mountain before ascending to meet the other ink creature. Less than a minute later they were flying side by side, and as soon as it was safe Tamari jumped on Sakura's bird and hugged her tightly. She let go and looked at the younger girl strangely before slapping her sharply. "What the hell was that? You talk about not abandoning comrades then pull a stunt like that. How do you think I would feel knowing that you saved my life twice then died? Some comrade I would have been." Sakura rubbed the welt on her cheek and smiled at the distraught girl as she ranted incoherently. "I think it's because I would have had one up on you." Tamari huffed and turned away from the Kunoichi and Sai butted in. "Focus please. I know females are more sensitive and prone to emotional outbursts, but we are fighting for our lives right now. Please get your estrogen under control." Sakura counted to 10 in her head while Temari grit her teeth and said, "You're so lucky you just saved us because that was your one freebie." The pale boy just nodded neutrally, not really caring either way. "So what's the plan?" Temari looked up the face of the cliff and started thinking out loud. Raiga has to be feeling exhausted after the jutsu. It was probably an A rank and he's been throwing B and C ranks around like nothing before that. As the fight wore on, his attacks kept getting weaker, and at the end he was mostly using raw elemental manipulation with a few IQ mixed in. "I think we just need to press the attack like we were doing in the start and wait for him to slip up." She looked at the other kunoichi pointedly. "He's going to be more susceptible to genjutsu now as well. I know that's not your forte, but you're a hell of a lot better at it than me. All we need is something to throw that freak off a little bit, or make him uncomfortable. Anything to force him into a mistake." Sakura could only nod at first. She wasn't used to hearing respect like that in other people's voices when directed at her, and the girl never, though she'd heard from Temari of all people. After getting her thoughts back under control, the pinkhead started looking up the cliff with determined eyes along with her team. The birds launched skyward before leveling out and they scanned the mountain for signs of their opponent. They glided in front of the sun to avoid being seen, but when they spotted Raiga on the mountainside, he was already looking directly at them. Sakura cursed and Sai placed more exploding tags on his scroll before summoning birds to attack. All three of them smiled when Raiga began running along the mountain to avoid the exploding birds, supporting their theory. Temari pulled her battle fan out of its holster before delivering her orders. "Sai, stay on the bird and look for the kill. Sakura, get close to the cliff and stay on the bird as long as possible, keep me covered. I'm going to drop to the face and try to go jutsu for jutsu to wear Raiga down. I doubt he has any more A ranks left in him and I have more than enough chakra to use Daikamaitachi several times if I need to." Confident in their ability to adapt and adjust her vague orders when necessary, Temari opened her fan and used it to glide towards Raiga without waiting for a response. She angled it to avoid the lightning crescent that the swordsman launched and threw a kunai with an exploding tag attached in retaliation before pulling back on her fan. Raiga jumped to the side to avoid the counter as the hot air from the blast boosted Temari upwards. She folded her large fan and flipped to the mountainside, seizing the high ground. No lightning surrounded Raiga's fangs as he looked at his newest opponent. She stood confidently with her battle fan at the ready, waiting for the first move to be made. The man growled and charged at her but pulled back and slid down the mountain as a cloud of blue smoke exploded in front of him. The blonde sent the poison towards him with a wave of her fan and Raiga started running along the cliff to avoid the cloud, but ink bats swarmed him and he skidded to a halt. The insane man growled and his swords let off an electrical discharge that dispelled the creatures before he launched a Raikou at one of the ink birds. It gracefully avoided the ball and Raiga launched a smaller one at Temari, who blasted it away with a simple Kamaitachi. She followed it up with another and Raiga was pushed down the mountainside because of the force. She sent one more at the former Kirinin before he could get his bearings and Ranmaru shouted a warning as he saw several gas pellets that would intercept the wind attack and the deadly fumes would rush over them. The missing nin's blades flared with electrical energy as he stabbed them into the rock. Reizo, Ikazuchi no Utage. A stream of lightning met the wind attack head-on and they cancelled each other out in an explosion, scattering the poison harmlessly. Raiga lifted his swords out of the ground but he felt Ranmaru flopping around limply in his carrier. The green-haired ninja started frantically calling for the boy over and over but there was no answer. "Ranmaru, answer me, Ranmaru, are you dead?" The Genin looked on in confusion as Raiga ranted until a boy strapped to his back poked his head out and kept on saying he was still here. The frantic man didn't acknowledge his actions at all and looked at the Konoha ninja as he let out a low growl. "You killed Ranmaru. You bastards." The boy realized his friend was in a genjutsu and was about to break it when he started laughing maniacally. "I guess I should thank you. I was wondering how to say I didn't ask for Orochimaru to heal him. All I need to do is kill you and I'll get his seal of power. I wouldn't have needed his eyes after this anyways, they just would have been a bonus." Tears began to stream down Ranmaru's cheeks as the implications of what Raiga was saying set in. A hollow feeling overtook him, his chest got tighter and the distraught child let out a pitiful wail as the pain consumed him. The one person who accepted him, befriended him, cared for him. The frail child was just a tool, it was all a lie. There was never any companionship or care involved. Ranmaru felt betrayed, he was no better than the lightning fangs in Raiga's hands and his tiny heart shattered at the realization. The high pitch of Ranmaru's screech pierced Raiga's ears and released him from the genjutsu. He looked around in shock and confusion before seeing Ranmaru's tearful face and nervously asked, "What's wrong, Ranmaru? Did they put you in a genjutsu?" The boy shook his head and answered without his usual cheer, "No, I can't be put in genjutsu. You'd know that though if you actually listened to me, cared about me." The child's voice trailed off and the mist began to thicken around Raiga. Suddenly everything went black and all the swordsman could see were two red orbs that simmered with hate and rage as they glared at him. The swordsman realized what was happening and bellowed as he stabbed one of his blades into the hump on his back. The boy in the cocoon let out a yelp as the fine edge of his sword slashed through his carrier and flesh. He started rolling down the mountain, picking up speed. Luckily they were close enough to the ground that the slope was more gradual and he slid down the mountainside instead of freefalling. That being said, the boy violently tumbled down, seemingly hitting every rock on the way and leaving a trail of blood. Sakura stared in horror as the poor child disappeared down the mountain. She put the man in a genjutsu that made him believe his greatest advantage lost. The kunoichi just assumed it would be his swords, but apparently that boy had a special power. In all likelihood he was the one tracking them for Raiga. Guilt welled up inside her as she realized it was her genjutsu that had gotten a child killed. The Junon hated herself for it, even if the boy was technically the enemy. The hate began to boil over and transfer to Raiga, and Sakura looked coldly at the man with frosty emerald eyes. Her hands flared blue as the furious kunoichi leapt off the ink bird and 4 more Sakuras phased into existence behind her as she touched down on the mountain. Raiga's blade stabbed towards what he thought was the original in the center, but it kept going through and the clone didn't disperse or show any damage like a bunchai normally would. Confused, he turned back around and blocked a kunai strike before feeling a sharp pain in his stomach. The swordsman dropped the blade hanging by his side as it grabbed his torn abdomen and he coughed up blood. It dribbled down his chin as he kicked through the Sakura attacking him, ignoring the pain in his stomach. His attack went right through her once again, but suddenly it felt like his lower leg was disconnected from his thigh, as he couldn't lift it. Raiga screamed in fury as he dumped chakra, what little he could spare, into his one remaining sword, and it discharged a small storm of electricity. The pink-haired girl suddenly appeared behind the man, and with a squeal of pain slid down the mountain before grabbing a handhold to stop her descent. Raiga started to run down towards her, intent on returning the pain and then some, but a blast of wind forced him to slide across the mountain, away from the dazed kunoichi. He looked at the blonde who interrupted his attack and realized there was one more Junon just as a small ink bird flew into his line of sight. Even though his eyes weren't as good as Ranmaru's, he could clearly see the tag fizzling on its back and couldn't even let out a cry before it went off, sending him careening down the slope. The lightning fang in his hand glowed blue and he stabbed it into the face of the mountain before he slid over the edge of a cliff with a 70-foot drop. The right side of Raiga was missing most of his hair and his eye was burnt shut as a result of the explosion. His body was blackened with burns while his whole torso was battered and cut from the fight before. Still, he somehow mustered up the strength to yell defiantly at the Junon, "You can't kill me. I won't let you kill me. I can't die here." Sakura's free hand rummaged around in her pouch for the bomb she was looking for and pulled out a green pellet with a black number 1 on it. She took aim and threw it next to the missing nin's face just as he started to yell, causing him to inhale the fumes on his last roar. Before the medic in training left, Rin gave her several doses of an experimental poison she was working on for the last year or so for the Anbu. When Shizune came back, she immediately jumped in to help in an effort to rekindle her old friendship with the brunette medic. Rin gladly accepted her help because of Shizune's skill with poison, and this was the first usable dose ready for testing. It was a nerve toxin that shut down all communications between the brain and the muscle, so the target wouldn't even have the strength to lift an arm. At the same time, it hypersensitized the pain receptors in the area of the brain that communicates with them, so even minor discomforts are more pronounced. The concoction was made for capture and interrogation in the field, so it also wouldn't let the victim pass out from pain. Raiga deserved to die and feel every hit on the way down like Ranmaru. It was just an added bonus that it would hurt more. She was supposed to use it on a live subject in battle to test the effects, but if the kunoichi could hear Raiga's screams after 10 seconds or so, she'd say it was effective when talking to her sensei. The missing nin felt his grip loosening after inhaling the gas. No matter how much he willed his fist to close, it just wouldn't respond. Eventually he could hold on no longer and plunged into the morning mist. Sakura counted to 7 before she couldn't hear anything. She just hoped the howling wind covered the screams. The pink had set her feet on the cliff and was about to jump in the general direction Ranmaru fell when a hand landed on her shoulder. Sakura looked behind her to see Sai shaking his head. "Naruto needs our help more." Sakura's emerald eyes shimmered as she looked in the direction Ranmaru tumbled. She just wiped them and turned towards Sai and Tamari. The sandy blonde looked down the mountain before glancing at Sai. "While we have a second, I have to ask, how does a bird made of ink screech?" The pale boy just stared at her with something akin to annoyance on his usually blank features. "You ask too many questions," Naruto sneered at Kimimaro, revealing his elongated canines, as he formed the seal for Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The Kaguya prepared himself for another batch of the clones, but he was taken aback at the amount of blonde surrounding him when the smoke cleared. The bone user cocked an eyebrow and faced in the general direction the real Naruto was originally in. "This is somewhat impressive, but you can make any amount of copies you want and it won't matter. You're so pitiful I won't break a sweat if you number 1 or 1000. The clones ignored his boasts and many leapt into the air, forming a dome of bodies around Kimimaro. Half of the Naruto copies transformed into Fuuma Shuriken and the remaining clones launched them at the pale teen while shouting, "Shiho Happo Shuriken!" Shuriken from all sides. The bone user ignored the approaching weapons, confident they couldn't pierce his bone armor, but when they got close the Shuriken transformed back into clones and dogpiled Kimimaro. More Naruto clones rushed the pile holding Rasengans, intent on drilling through their brothers to get to the prize in the middle. A muffled Karamatsu no Mai, Dance of the Larch, reached their ears from under the pile and grunts of pain followed as Kimimaro walked out with needle-like bones protruding from what seemed like every inch of his body. He brought his hands together in the ram seal and the bones all launched from his body into the crowd of clones, dispelling scores. The remaining ones were undeterred by their staggering losses and charged recklessly while letting loose battle cries. Kimimaro just calmly stood there and long, sharp bones began to protrude nearly 2 feet out from the tops of his knees, the back of his elbow, up out of his shoulders, and 2 sprouted out of his palms as he intoned, "Yanagi no Mai, Dance of the Willow." He launched himself like a torpedo with one clone and his shoulder bones pierced through it before he flipped and landed. Kimimaro lifted his right knee and used the bone to block the sword of one clone before his left-hand blade impaled its face. As he turned 180 degrees his elbow bones dispelled 4 more clones, and after the teen completed the turn he planted his right foot and flipped over a blonde missile that was thrown by 2 clones. While in midair the bones in the tips of his fingers poked through once again and as soon as the teen landed he launched his barrage of projectiles, Teshi Senden. The bone bullets passed through the first clones like nothing was there and each went on to dispel several more before clearing the circle of clones. The Kage Bunshin horde began to back off out of respect. Seeing that simply rushing the juggernaut in front of them would do nothing they changed tactics. The Bunshins began to use the Gukuo to distract him from range while others were getting in position for ambushes. The bone user appeared to dance around most of the blasts and the occasional clone that would try an ambush. Occasionally a Gukuo or Naruto's blade slipped through his defenses, but that resulted in nothing more than a quickly healed flesh wound. Kimimaro crossed his arms forming an X in front of him to block the wind blast and was pushed back several feet. The small gashes inflicted by the attack were already healing as he turned to meet the next charge. The short delay between the real Kimimaro and the clone allowed the attacking Kage Bunshin to close the distance between them and deliver a stab that should have gone under the teen's ribs, but was simply deflected by a plate of bone. The Kaguya pivoted and delivered a stab of his own to the attacking clone with the bone protruding from his right elbow, but when he impaled its chest and completed his turn Kimimaro found he couldn't pull his arm back around for his next move. Orochimaru's agent cocked his head to see a clone holding onto the bone tightly and tried to bring his left arm around to dispel it but another clone had grabbed the bone coming out of that elbow too. A third Naruto burst from the ground in front of him and grabbed the 2 bones coming from the Kaguya's knees as 6 more charged him with Rasengan swirling madly in their hands. The seal on Kimimaro's chest pulsed again and bones rose from the ground around him, dispelling the clones. The circle continued to grow outwards as 7-foot-tall spikes of bone sprouted from the rock like miniature trees and dispelled the remaining clones. Kimimaro floated out of the bone meadow, without any bones sticking out of his body, and looked around for the original Naruto. Suddenly the area around him was blasted with multiple Gukuo from above and the stone around Kimimaro exploded upwards, launching him airborne. The Kaguya torqued his body and was once again looking into those furious eyes as the blonde launched himself airborne with a Rasengan the size of a small melon in his palm, and the bone clone watched as it slammed into his torso. If that were the real Kimimaro the pain would have been excruciating, easily worse than the first time judging by the damage inflicted, but it was simply a copy without nerves and pain wasn't transferred through the link. The creation raised its arm like nothing was happening and a bone spike extended outwards. He watched the boy's mismatched red eyes widen in terror as he gripped the blade and brought it down to behead the Chunin. Naruto instinctively overloaded the Rasengan like he would a Hanryu and it exploded outwards, sending the combatants spiraling away from each other. The blonde received a deep gash down the length of his forearm from one of the whirling blades of chakra inside the Rasengan, but it was better than getting decapitated by far. The wound was almost completely healed as he unsheathed his chakra saber and it glowed a brilliant white, exuding power. Kimimaro just stood there as his torso finished knitting itself together, holding his dull, grayish-white bone sword that looked unremarkable but was harder than diamond. They carefully scrutinized each other, ready for the next round. On some unseen signal the two exploded into motion. Kimimaro slashed at Naruto's left and he lifted his blade, careful to keep it on the inside. He retained his forward momentum after blocking the swipe and tried to stab his opponent in the mouth. Kimimaro was forced to disengage his sword and spin to Naruto's right, so the blonde couldn't gain any leverage with his blade. Naruto stopped his stab quickly and delivered a short slash at Kimimaro's neck that forced the teen to hop backwards as soon as he completed the spin. The bone user brought his blade down in an overhead slash but Naruto used some of the stored chakra in the saber to encase it in Futon chakra. It howled with fury as he pumped chakra into his legs and aggressively launched himself forward, under the strike, and stabbed into Kimimaro's armpit. To the teen's surprise the blade sunk over an inch into his bone before the blonde wrenched it out and tried to eviscerate him. A bone extended from Kimimaro's left arm that stopped Naruto's slash, even though the wind-encased blade almost cut through it, and he slammed his forehead into the blonde's after hardening it. A gash opened up from the blunt force trauma and some blood began to leak down the Chunin's face but the wound was quickly healing and Naruto wiped the red liquid away. Kimimaro was wondering how the blonde was improving at such a rapid pace. The Chunin got fast and strong enough to make him work after the transformation true, but the difference in their techniques was great enough that there wasn't any major concern for the older boy. However, it seemed like with every exchange this infuriating brat was getting better. Realizing now wasn't the time to worry about such things, Kimimaro rushed at his opponent and attacked with seemingly wild slashes. Naruto couldn't find room to counter the Kaguya's onslaught because no matter how crazy and unplanned it looked, the elder teen was never out of control. He didn't lose his balance or waste energy by overextending himself, and all the transitions between strikes were made quickly and fluently. Naruto leaned back and watched a slash go over his face that was aimed at his jugular. He was about to drop to his back and try to take Kimimaro's feet out, but the pale warrior stopped his attack and reversed so quickly there was no time to react and backhanded the blonde, sending him skidding across the ground. The Konohamanin regained his feet quickly, but Kimimaro had already blurred behind him. The Kaguya's eyes widened though when the saber's hit spun rapidly in the Chunin's palm before he took his blade in the backhand grip to parry the stab and pushed off to put some distance between them. Naruto smirked as he watched his opponent's eyes narrow in frustration. "That was lucky, but trash like you won't be able to copy my moves again. It was all skill, maybe you're just not as good as you thought," replied the Jinchuriki with an arrogant smirk. Naruto lifted his sword to parry a wild overhead strike that Kimimaro telegraphed but never came. The Sharingan was able to pick out the change in movement but Naruto couldn't react in time as the auto Shinobi delivered a brutal rising knee to Naruto's chin that had him seeing stars. He grabbed the disoriented boy's head before he could hit the ground and began smashing it repeatedly into a nearby boulder. Blood began pouring down the blonde's face as Kimimaro continued to maliciously slam the blonde's head into the rock, almost like he was trying to prove a point. Naruto could feel his grip on consciousness fading and knew he had to escape immediately and pulled more of Kyuubi's chakra out until he was glowing orange. The bone user kept the assault up as long as he could, but the strange chakra was literally eating through his skin and bones like acid and he couldn't heal the damage fast enough. When it began to spread up his arm he was forced to throw the blonde across the plateau. Naruto slowly regained his feet and wobbly turned to face the Kaguya who was slowly walking towards the Konohamanin. However, before Kimimaro could take advantage of the Jinchuriki's weakened state the rest of his team arrived. Fortunately the superficial damage from the white-haired teen's brutal assault was already healed so they were more worried about two auto shinobi staring them down. The Chunin grit his teeth as he looked between Kimimaro and his team. They were good, but this guy had already proved numbers wouldn't matter in a fight. And even though they brought different skill sets to the table, Naruto still couldn't think of a way to bring him down by conventional means. The blonde reached up and began to rub his eye knowing what he had to do. "Back off guys, I'm about to finish this." The white-haired ninja sneered in response. "How are you going to do that? Make me beat you so much I can't move anymore." Naruto lowered his hand revealing his Sharingan had morphed into a red six-pointed star, formed by three intersecting ellipses, that was outlined in black instead of three tomoe circling his pupil. Kimimaro was growing tired of the blonde's seemingly endless bag of surprises and prepared himself for anything. The star began spinning rapidly, causing the bone user to tense up and Naruto formed some hand seals. The clone spread a thin but hard layer of bone under its skin, ready for the attack. The Chunin finished his seals and pointed both palms towards Kimimaro and said, "Amaterasu." A stream of black flame erupted from his left pupil and Naruto quickly followed it with, Futon, Datapa. A violent gust of wind exploded towards Kimimaro and the stream of black flames became a firestorm that engulfed almost the whole plateau in front of Naruto, including the Kaguya. But the black flames hid the sinister markings of the seal spreading across his chest as he lay on the ground, covered by black fire. The real Kimimaro opened his eyes in the storage room and looked around to see that the only things in it were packed bags and people waiting for his orders. He had a minute at most before he would have to transform the clone into stage 2 for it to still be usable, so he sat back to think. His technique worked flawlessly and the Konoha ninja thought themselves victorious, so he could quietly sneak away with Raiga's men, but that left a sour taste in the teen's mouth. There was no logical reason for him to keep fighting. The flames would be nearly impossible to put out if they were burning so strongly this high up, and at the rate the clone was spending chakra to regenerate it would only have a couple of minutes after transforming before its well ran dry. Still, Kimimaro wanted to inflict as much pain as possible on that blonde shinobi, and that would be plenty of time to obliterate the annoyance. The Kaguya stopped his train of thought to wonder where this irrational anger was coming from. He certainly didn't hold a grudge from the Rasengan when they first met. In fact, he didn't give the shinobi a second thought until he saw the teen holding that swirling ball of chakra again. The blonde was doing his duty and Kimimaro took his figurative pound of flesh from Naruto as well. It was on the mountainside when their eyes met. That's when Kimimaro knew he hated the blonde with every fiber of his being. As he waited for the chunin on the plateau, that stare haunted him. The bone wielder couldn't give any rational explanation why. The shinobi's mismatched eyes were unique, but at the same time they seemed so familiar to him. When Naruto finally landed on the plateau and stared at the pale teen with that same defiant gaze, the one that screamed he would never give in to any adversity but also hid something so eerily familiar, well, 1,000 ways to kill the blonde rat crossed Kimimaro's mind and he tried to pick out the most excruciating one. The Kaguya looked around the room for the most capable-looking man and decided it was best if he just gave them some simple orders before returning to battle. Make sure everything is ready one last time. We'll be leaving soon whether you're ready or not, and whoever isn't won't be leaving at all. With that said, he closed his eyes and reconnected to his bone clone, ignoring the frantic questions that were fading away. Naruto fell to his knees in pain and exhaustion. He reached up to cover the sharingan with his Konoha headband and it reverted back to normal as blood began to spill from the socket. The chunin was able to steady himself for a moment and summoned a horde of shadow clones before taking a small scroll from his vest. He unrolled it and wiped his thumb over one of the many spots of blood on him before swiping it over the storage seal. What had to be 50 scrolls with the kanji for fire appeared on them and the clones grabbed them before spreading out along the plateau, careful to avoid the deadly flames. The three Genin watched in amazement as each Bunshine opened the scroll they held and raised their voices, causing the black fire to be sucked into them like some type of vortex. They turned their questioning gaze to Naruto and he explained while breathing heavily. When Sasuke's eye was transplanted, it evolved into a higher level of the sharingan that was one of the greatest secrets of the Uchiha clan. It allows me to use that black fire, Amaterasu. Unfortunately, I can't really control them after the attack and nothing we've tried can put it out, so I have to seal it. The teen's shoulders sagged as he whined. Now I have to buy the supplies and make a bunch more. The clones had the fire sealed before the explanation was finished and one Bunshine took the last scroll before approaching the burning body of Kimimaro while the original said, he had some type of freaky bloodline that allowed him to control his bones. I think the village would want us to bring back what we can. Sakura frowned as she examined the body curiously, a good distance away because the heat from the flames was too intense. Do you think that's a good idea? Just the fact that you needed to use this makes me think we should just let it go until he's nothing but ashes. The clone unrolled the scroll and started chanting and his creator explained the attack more. That's really not necessary, Sakura-chan. A huge bear got within 3 feet of it and burst into flames. It was regular fire but still fire. There's no way anyone could survive that, unless he was a zombie or something. The flames were sucked into the scroll, revealing the half-burnt body of the last Kaguya. Sakura got a little closer and gasped, "Oh my god, that attack completely destroyed all his organs. There's nothing left but bone, muscle, and some blackened skin." Suddenly, dark chakra began pulsing and a strange pattern grew across what was left of Kimimaro. It looked like some type of circuit that was pumping a dark chakra through his body, his rapidly healing body. The markings then glowed an orange-red before engulfing what they thought was his corpse and covering the gaping wounds. Then the silhouette slowly sprouted a tail and 3 long curved bones burst from each side of his torso as his spine sprouted out of the skin along the tail like plate armor on a dinosaur. The glow faded and there stood a monster that strangely resembled the Kaguya. His skin was no longer pale but an ashy black and he had dark rings around his eyes like a raccoon. He did sprout a long, ridge tail and the tips of those curved bones were hollow, but still came to a dangerously sharp point. The thing lifted his hand and Naruto yelled, "Duck!" But Sakura was too close to dodge the projectiles and one went through her right shoulder, taking out a circle of flesh about an inch in diameter. The emerald Daijinnan collapsed to the ground in pain and Naruto stared in shock. His heart cracked and two red eyes shot open deep inside his subconscious in response to his anger. An orange-red chakra burst from the boy as Blonde's lips were outlined by a thin black line and his hair became thicker and wilder. He crouched over on all fours as the shroud surrounding him sprouted two long ears and a single tail. The mountain itself seemed to tremble in fear of these monsters as it shook violently. Kimimaro quirked an eyebrow at the new transformation and reached behind his neck to pull out his spine. When it was all the way out, the cartilage stretched, spacing out the vertebrae until it resembled a whip. Once that was done, the bones in his left forearm burst out of the skin and grew ridiculously large until it formed a solid drill-like bone. The bone looked like a large morning glory and was about as long as the Kaguya was tall, 3 feet wide in the back, and tapered to a sharp point. I doubt you can understand, but let me explain. This is my most powerful dance, Tessenka no Mai, Hana and Tsuru. They use the hardest bones in my body, nothing you do can stop them. Dance of the clematis flower and vine. Blood-red eyes snapped open deep inside Naruto's subconscious. The Kyuubi no Kitsune could feel the blonde pulling on his chakra and simply let it flow without resisting. Despite what most humans thought, the Nine-Tails wasn't just a mindless beast. He had been sealed for over half a century in 2 different containers before this one, and it learned a thing or two during that time. The Baizhu knew that if it pushed the chakra out too fast on some level, the host would recognize it and resist. No, it was better to let the chakra naturally feed the anger and they would subconsciously leech more power until it overwhelmed them. The giant fox grinned, revealing razor-sharp teeth larger than most skyscrapers. Eventually its host would start to lose themselves in the raw hatred that his chakra contained, and then it would be able to push out more and more until the blonde rat was consumed by it. The Kyuubi flexed his claws eagerly as Naruto began pulling on its chakra even more. First he would rip that damnable sharingan out, then it was playtime. Sai held a scroll at the ready and watched Temari as she snuck into position. The sandy blonde was attempting to grab Sakura before she got caught between these two titans. He was supposed to summon some ink lions to distract them if they focused on Temari, but he didn't think they would provide much time if any. He'd heard from Danzo that an out-of-control Jinchuriki was something to be avoided at all costs, and from the look on Temari's face she knew from personal experience. Even Sai's root training couldn't repress the shudder that ran down his spine from the dark chakra permeating the air. He looked closely at his blonde teammate. The reddish-orange chakra swirled around Naruto protectively before taking the shape of the fox. Sai looked closer and narrowed his eyes as he looked closer at the back of the shroud. It appeared that the Kyuubi's chakra was swirling around Naruto's chakra blade before continuing to flow up his body. He could only guess what it meant. The two leviathans stared each other down over the scarred plateau. Kimimaro looked at the feral blonde with a calculating gaze while Naruto stared eagerly, almost hungrily at the bone user. Suddenly the Kaguya was forced to lift his bone flower and block the rocks stirred up by a gust of wind sent his way by the Sunaku no Ichi. Kimimaro disappeared from his spot and ran through the wind like it wasn't there and was on a collision course with Temari, who had picked up the injured Sakura. The dinosaur-like beast readied his spear, intent on running them both through, but he was shoulder-checked by Naruto and they rolled away from the two kunoichi. Kimimaro sprung to his feet and gained some separation, but the Jinchuriki was closing in fast. The Kaguya sidestepped a slashing claw and spun as the blonde passed before smashing his tail into the Chunin's back. The hit combined with Naruto's momentum sent him bouncing across the uneven ground, but he was able to slow himself with a chakra claw and used it to propel himself back towards his prey. Kimimaro snapped his left wrist and the bone whip encircled the charging shinobi, but before he could ensnare Naruto the Jinchuriki roared and the shockwave left the whip flailing uselessly. The Chunin had his claw poised for a strike, but the Kaguya raised the large bone horizontally across his body and Naruto landed on top of it. He tried to throw the blonde off, but a red claw of chakra shot out from his hand and gripped the bone user's head. A vicious smile spread across the Jinchuriki's face as he smashed Kimimaro's into the ground before using his chakra claw to drag him across the plateau, leaving a large trench in his wake. Naruto then started to use Kimimaro as a battering ram to take down the boulder piles. The ashy monster smashed through nearly a dozen of the piles before he was slammed back into the ground repeatedly. The blonde quickly grew bored of his game though. The captured teen didn't let loose one scream of pain through the whole process. In fact, the expression on his face never shifted and he managed to keep his icy eyes on Naruto the whole time. The Chunin hated those eyes, the ones that said he was insignificant, second place, that no matter what he did the bone user would always be better. He let out a frustrated roar before throwing Kimimaro into the cliffside. The bone user disappeared and cracks spider-webbed out from the point of impact before a large portion of the face collapsed on top of him. The boulders exploded upwards as the prehistoric beast stood up with a roar and charged towards Naruto. The hollow bones protruding from his back began launching large bone bullets at the blonde, but they bounced harmlessly off his chakra cloak. The Jinchuriki responded immediately and launched himself forward with a chakra claw raised, but Kimimaro ducked under the blonde before pivoting 180 degrees and wrapping his whip around Naruto's right leg. To the Kaguya's amazement, the poisonous chakra was already agitating the cartilage of his whip, so he threw the blonde into the air before launching himself skyward. He appeared upside down above Naruto when the blonde hit the apex of his flight and finished the flip, causing his tail to hit to the feral shinobi's chest like a whip and sent him careening towards the earth. Kimimaro let his satisfied smirk show before letting out a curse as he landed. The blonde hit the ground hard and created a large cloud of smoke, but the jagged ground became a sinkhole and started imploding. The mountain itself was honeycombed with passageways and not stable enough to absorb too many blows like that. The Kaguya didn't feel like finding out if he could level it, especially when his real body was inside. The bone user wouldn't be able to use his large attacks and would have to absorb the Jinchurikis because he obviously wouldn't hold back. Kimimaro returned his focus to Naruto and realized that the Chunin's orange tail wasn't waving wildly behind him. Said tail burst through the ground at the bone user's feet before wrapping around the pale teen and squeezing tightly. The acidic chakra combined with the pressure was starting to damage the clone severely, so the real Kimimaro pulled forth more cursed seal chakra from the reserves. His arms broke free from the chakra tail and the sickly black chakra encased them before he grabbed the tail with his whip hand, while still holding the weapon, and gave a mighty pull. Naruto let himself be pulled towards the white-haired shinobi and charged up a crimson Rasengan, about the size of a grapefruit, in his right hand. Kimimaro pulled the chakra tail to the left to change the blonde's direction and jumped to the right as he cut through the tail with the point of his bone flower while smashing the blonde with his tail. The Chunin didn't get very far before the bone whip extended and wrapped around his body, allowing Kimimaro to pull him back in. Naruto stopped the stabbing bone with his hands, but Kimimaro kicked him in the stomach before yanking back in once more. Naruto batted aside the point of the flower this time and tried to slash through the cartilage of the whip, but Kimimaro's forehead found his nose before the bone tail smashed into his ribs. The Kaguya continued to play yo-yo with the enraged Jinchuriki. Naruto would manage to avoid the initial stab but would take heavy damage from the various other natural weapons covering Kimimaro's body. The blonde let out a maddened roar as a second tail sprouted from the cloak and his hair became wilder, his fangs longer, and the dark line around his mouth deepened. The influx of corrosive chakra ate through the bone whip as Kimimaro tried to pull back in and the feral Chunin went flying as a result. Naruto did several barrel rolls before landing on all fours and let loose another howl, except the shockwave from this one pushed Kimimaro back several feet. As soon as the reverberations ended, Naruto seemingly vanished. Kimimaro turned and tried to backhand the attacking blonde with his bone, but the Jinchuriki stopped it with one hand and used it to throw Kimimaro into the air. Much like the bone user, Naruto appeared above his target at the apex of his flight, but that's where the similarities ended. The blonde was right side up and his hands were interlocked behind his head. He let Kimimaro fall as the red chakra extended from his hands and he swung them over his head and the two-handed chakra fist smashed into Kimimaro. Red and black chakra began to collect in front of Naruto's mouth as soon as he delivered the strike and formed a sphere about 16 inches in diameter. The blonde roared and the shockwave sent the ball speeding towards the falling Kaguya. It impacted his torso and increased his already impressive rate of descent. The beast smashed into the ground and the mountain began to quake from the impact. The shaking loosened the debris on top of him and Kimimaro emerged slowly. His ribs were completely visible as was his empty abdomen, and his back was completely cut up from the impact. The clone was almost completely out of chakra, so the wounds were healing slowly while the beast in front of him was only getting stronger as the fight progressed. The bone user's eyes widened when a third tail began to form and he began to regret the decision to finish the fight. A wicked grin spread across the Kyuubi's face when an avatar of his host appeared in front of his cage, surrounded by a thick ball of his chakra. The blonde was floating about 50 feet off the ground with his eyes closed and the Baijuwu knew it was time. A red mist began to leak through the bars of the cage and circled around Naruto. When it completely surrounded him, the vapors became more substantial and the Kyuubi had completed the connection. Just a little bit more and he could take control. Once the fourth tail came out, the boy's body would be his and he would play his favorite game, see how much of High no Kuni he could destroy before his chakra was suppressed once more. We need to get out of here. Eventually one of their attacks will hit us. Sai frowned at the frantic blonde in front of him before looking at the two fighters behind him. As much as I agree we can't leave. It was a big enough risk moving Sakura this far, and if we try to leave the plateau she'll definitely die. As long as there's a chance I won't leave. Tamari rubbed her temples as Sai started to rummage through Sakura's medical pack. They had secured the pink hat to Tamari's fan and moved her as quickly as they though prudent. Now they were on the opposite side of the plateau from the two beasts, but in Tamari's opinion Konoha would be too close. She'd seen a raging Jinchuriki before, it gave her nightmares for years and it was something she didn't want to ever be near again. Hoping that Naruto saving her and Sakura was a sign he was still there, she turned back to her injured teammate. The kunoichi was constantly getting paler and colder, soon it would be a moot point and they would have to leave. But that only filled Tamari with more despair. Sai finished crushing and mixing some pills up before filling a syringe from a test tube labeled adrenaline. He injected Sakura and her eyes shot open. When she began coughing he put the powdered pills in her mouth before gently pouring some water into her mouth. The pink hat's voice rasped out as her hand glowed, "Thanks Sai, get more blood pills ready. I also have some small clear tubes in my pack, get those out." The medic gritted her teeth as she disinfected the wound. She wished that she could numb the pain, but then Sakura wouldn't be able to treat herself because she wouldn't feel anything. The green-eyed girl began feeling around the hole in her chest after she cleaned it and she left her fingers in several spots. By the time Sai came back she was ready to go. "Sai, I'm going to remove my fingers from the left side one at a time. I want you to match up the diameter of the vein or artery with the tubes, cut it to length, and then slide it in. I'll take my finger off the corresponding blood vessel and you need to slide it in there too. Once they're all done they'll keep the blood flowing and you can give me another pill." The pale artist had incredibly steady hands, even for a shinobi, from drawing all his life, so was able to carry out the assigned task with ease. Soon enough Sakura had the artificial veins and arteries set and had another blood and soldier pill mixture fed to her. The pink cat stubbornly took her feet and tried to walk towards Naruto before Tamari grabbed hold of her. "What do you think you're doing? You just got healed and now you want to walk to your death." Naruto might have some semblance of control now, but we don't know how long that will last. "Now that you're stable we need to evacuate right now." To punctuate the older blonde's point, the chakra exploded around Naruto and the killing intent became almost palpable. Sakura's eyes never wavered despite that. "I know that I won't be able to help in the fight, but I can't sit here and do nothing anymore. I did that for so long and I promised myself I wouldn't any longer. That I would be there when my teammates need me." A comforting hand landed on Sakura's shoulder and she turned her head to look at Tamari. The older kunoichi had a faraway look in her eyes before they focused back on the spectacle in front of them. "I know how you feel, but I've seen Gaara like that and there's nothing you can do, nothing anyone can do." Emerald eyes narrowed as soon as Tamari finished and Sakura coldly said, "So people tried, or is that what you told yourself to sleep at night?" Anger welled up inside Tamari, but it was quickly overtaken by shame, something she was feeling a lot since meeting Naruto and Sakura in Sunagaku no Sato. Her baby brother's first connection was with a rookie Jonin from outside of the village. That was something that she always wanted to say, that she was Gaara's first real connection. But in the end fear held her back. Then she came to Konoha, and despite the fact that she had gotten stronger, become faster, her chakra reserves had increased, and she improved her close-range capabilities. Sakura had still closed the gap between them. A kunoichi from a civilian family was improving faster than one descended from every Kazekage Suna had ever known. A couple of minutes ago she wanted to abandon the pink head and run because of her own fear. And now Tamari was saying they should abandon Naruto, the person that she owed so much to. Her teal eyes hardened with resolve as she nodded to the pink cat. "Let's go then." Sakura looped her right arm over Tamari's shoulder and the blonde grabbed her wrist. Before they took off Sai coughed from behind them and they turned. "Do be careful. I'll prepare to extract you too should it come to that, so don't get too close, otherwise I won't have time." The girls nodded and Sai melted into a puddle of ink, revealing they were talking to a clone. They turned back to Naruto to see the red and black chakra was swirling around him wildly, destroying the surrounding area. Now that the third tail was grown in, even Kimimaro couldn't get too close. Tamari turned to Sakura with determination in her eyes. "I take it you have a plan." "Nope. Tranquility." That was the only way to describe it. Naruto felt as if he was floating like a cloud thousands of feet above the ground, miles away from any troubles or worry. There was no pain or discomfort, it was neither too hot nor too cold. The only sound was the rhythmic dripping of water, so soothing and relaxing. Everything was at peace, everything was perfect. The only problem was he couldn't remember who he was, what he was, anything beyond this contentment. Was that a problem though? If he remembered his identity, then he'd have to deal with all the pain that came with it. The trials and tribulations, heartaches and sorrows. No, it was better to just forget, to float freely without a care forever. Something echoed in the distance and disturbed the stillness, but the dripping of the water covered it up. It came again, louder this time, but still the rhythmic tripping soothed him and he forgot. Except the noise kept getting louder and eventually the blonde strained his ears trying to hear it, but the water only got louder. He stood on the water he was lying in and tried to hear again, but the water got louder and angrier. A geyser burst up next to the teen and he rolled to the side as another followed. The water then pulled away to the edges, leaving the ground dry, and the Konoha ninja saw that it formed into a giant wave. As it got closer he realized that it wasn't water at all. It was bright red and bubbled crazily. The Uzumaki knew that if the tsunami engulfed him it was over, he'd never find out what the sound was. But it was so big, how could he stop it? As if he knew the answer all along, his blue and red eyes hardened and he remembered he never gave up because he was Uzumaki Naruto. The Chunin of Konohagakure no Sato, student to Hatake Kakashi and Jiraiya of the Sannin, the future Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, opened his left eye and the three Tomoe swirled wrathfully, propelled by his fury. The wave of malicious chakra parted and the darkness faded. He was then standing in front of a giant cage with golden bars, once again staring down the strongest being on the planet, who glared back angrily. "Are you going to hypnotize me with your fancy eye now, boy? It just shows how weak you really are. Always relying on borrowed power." "You say it like I enjoy it," harshly responded Naruto. "If you weren't such a bastard I wouldn't need to. You would have killed my team after killing Kimimaro, then you'd probably hunt down anyone close by for fun." The hackles on the back of Kyuubi's neck rose as he snapped to his feet and responded, "A bastard am I? Well, you only have yourselves to blame. I'd like to see how you act towards people after the human race tries to hunt you down and harness your power for centuries." Naruto gave the Kyuubi a deprecating smile. "I see what's going on here. The great Kyuubi no Kitsune, strongest of the Baijuu, is throwing himself a pity party. You think I asked to have you sealed in me? That I enjoy hosting your fuzzy ass? You're not the only one that's had it rough, but I bet you never tried to change anyone's opinion." "What? Why would I bother?" roared the Nine Tails. "Everywhere I went people responded with fear and attacked, or tried to use my power for their own gain. Humans are no better than any other animals. In fact they're worse, just as instinctive and bestial as anything else, but try to claim they aren't. At least a chimpanzee doesn't claim to be civilized before killing its rival to mate. And how many people attacked you before you decided that? 100? 1,000? That's not a lot compared to the millions of people everywhere. Either way, I'm not here to argue with you about how crappy your existence is. When you decide to stop feeling sorry for yourself we'll talk. Until then just stay in your cage." With that the blonde disappeared after dispelling some of the chakra surrounding him, and the Kyuubi was alone once more. The great beast lay back down and rested his head on his paws before closing his eyes. It would allow Naruto to use his chakra as he pleased, just this once. Not many people would ever say anything like that to him, even behind a cage. He resembled his crazy bitch of a mother in more ways than one. At least he didn't have those damnable chains. A single red eye snapped open and the storm of chakra surrounding Naruto receded. He turned to the two girls calling his name and gave them a comforting smile. At least he hoped it was comforting with his dark whisker marks and long fangs. It appeared to have worked as they sagged in relief, and he narrowed his eye at the transformed Kimimaro as two tails waved crazily behind him. The bone user was slouched over and his arms hung by his sides. He hadn't even formed a new whip. Naruto stood back up on 2 feet and tried to suppress the rage coursing through him. He just wanted to go over there and smash the Kaguya until his bones stopped regenerating. The blonde closed his eye and took a calming breath before opening it and smiling cockily at Kimimaro. "Getting tired?" "No," responded the bone clone. He stood up straight and lifted his bone flower defensively in front of him. He had about 10% of his chakra left, enough for one good attack. It was too risky to use Soarabi no Mai, Dance of the Seedling Fern. The mountain had already proved to be unstable, and creating a giant forest of bone spikes wouldn't help it in that regard. Kimimaro considered making another whip, but that proved ineffective against the chakra cloak, and it cost a lot of chakra to regenerate all the nerves in his spinal cord. Kimimaro lifted his right arm and held it next to his left as he backed into an outcropping behind him and coiled his tail against it like a spring. "I was hoping you would regain your senses, not that I thought trash like you would be able to. But I really wanted you to understand what was happening as your entrails spilled out. Now allow me to show you my original move." Suddenly the bones grew out of the Kaguya's right arm and combined with the large cone on his left. They grew and twisted around each other until the bone drill was 7 feet long and 4 wide, supported by both his arms. The bone user then stuck his feet to the stone before overloading them and his tail with the tainted chakra and exploding at the blonde, spinning rapidly. Naruto wasn't sitting idly while Kimimara's bones were forming and had started gathering as much of the Kyuubi's chakra as he could handle. The Jinchuriki swirled individual strands of the chakra faster and faster as he added more of it to the mix. By the time Kimimaro had completed his drill, he had a Rasengan about 2 feet wide swirling furiously above his palm. The blonde's eye widened when the bone wielder exploded off of the cliff, but he got the ball of chakra up in time and it collided with the drilling bone. The blonde was pushed back nearly 20 feet, but Kimimaro couldn't pierce the incredibly dense chakra. However, his bones could become harder than diamonds, and although wind chakra was able to cut into them, the Rasengan was made for grinding, not cutting, and couldn't damage the hardest bone in his body. Still, Kimimaro knew he would lose this exchange. His rotation was quickly coming to a halt while the spiraling sphere of chakra continued to rotate angrily. After nearly 10 seconds, the bone user stopped his spin and the Rasengan forced the clone upright before drilling into its abdomen. The dinosaur-like monster flew into the cliff, disappearing from view. Sai appeared next to the two girls with an ink sunshine, and all 4 of the shinobi stared into the hole for what seemed like hours. When it became apparent that he was finally finished, Naruto let the chakra cloak recede and laughed. "Alright, I kicked that guy's ass hardcore. It's too bad that he decided to quit now, I could have gone for Ho." Without finishing his sentence, the Chunin blacked out without the Kyuubi's chakra powering his system. Sakura sighed, then grunted in pain as Temari lowered her so she was sitting with her back against the boulder. Sai just looked up the mountain like he was agitated. "There are no trees around to make a stretcher. They probably have one in the mines, but that means I'm going to have to take a soldier pill to fly up there and back." Temari punched the grumpy boy in the arm. "Lighten up, you're such a stick in the mud. Who worries about something like that after dealing with everything we just went through?" Instead of answering, Sai just plopped down with a grunt. "I don't know, I feel rather strange right now." Temari just lifted an eyebrow at the abnormal boy. She was definitely missing something about him, but that was a mystery for later. "Well, it's a good thing that you have a kunoichi of Sunagaku with you. Living in a desert makes you learn the importance of versatility." The sandy blonde unhinged her large battle fan, before carefully, almost ceremoniously, removing the paper between it and rolling it up neatly. Temari stuffed it into a pocket inside her pack before pulling out a roll of canvas with 2 rods at the end. She then unfolded the 2 iron pieces so she had 2 5-foot-long pieces of metal with a slot running down one side. Paper is at a premium in Kaze no Kuni, so sealing basic items is generally frowned upon. Instead, we create items that can be used for multiple things. That canvas can also be unfolded a couple more times and made into a tent. After answering Sai's unspoken question, the wind mistress tossed him all the components. "There are the pieces to the stretcher, put it together while I check on Sakura." Without waiting for an answer, although she heard Sai whisper bossy and something else that was forgotten for his sake, Temari went to check on the other kunoichi. She knelt down and Sakura tiredly mumbled, "Hey!" Temari sat next to her and rummaged through the medical bag that was lying in between them. "How are you feeling?" Sakura cracked open her left eye to glance at the fan wielder. "Tired. The adrenaline is wearing off and I just want to take a nap." "Is that okay?" asked Temari with a worried frown. The medic smiled and turned so the Suna ninja could look into the wound and see the blood running through the tubes. Part of the blonde wanted to turn away, but she couldn't make herself. "See, everything's fine. The only thing I really need to worry about is infection now. I have plenty of blood after the mix Sai gave me." Temari pulled out a roll of bandages and Sakura giggled. "You're quite the amateur. Just wrapping bandages around this won't do much. Take some gauze and cut some strips large enough to cover the wound, then use medical tape to hold them in place. If you really want to, you can bandage it after." Temari pulled out the items and cut Sakura's right sleeve to have easy access to the wound. While dressing the wound, she heard Sai approaching and without turning around said, "Don't come closer, I don't want you getting an eyeful. It's not like there's anything to see." Temari closed her eyes, waited for the outburst, but it never came. She opened them to see Sakura breathing deeply and evenly. "You're lucky she's asleep. I'll kill him later." Sai pulled out a blank scroll while answering in a neutral tone. "Considering I just saved your life, I think that's an empty threat. I finished scouting the mountainside and there's no easy path. I'll summon 2 ink birds and will carefully fly down before going the rest of the way on foot." Temari just nodded before standing up to help the artist load their teammates. Shortly after, they had the 2 large birds ready and took off in the direction of Kanehagakure no Sato. Kimimaro opened his eyes in the storage room. He had cut the connection as soon as the attack hit, knowing that it didn't have enough chakra left to regenerate the wounds the Rasengan would inflict. The fanatic stood as the feeling of disappointment set in. He'd have to improve greatly if trash like that could destroy his bone clone. The time he spent in a coma was no excuse in his mind. The white-haired teen put it out of his mind and stood up to address Raga's men. It's time to move out. The men followed the stoic shinobi without a question as he led them out of the waste dump where he jumped out of earlier. The Kaguya led them to the right, knowing that the plateau was off to the left, and set a brutal pace. Many of the men that didn't have the rudimentary chakra training fell, but Kimimaro always managed to save their packs by throwing a bone saber through one of the loops. He probably could have saved the people too, but gold was worth more than trash. As they neared the bottom, Kimimaro heard a pitiful groan of pain carried by the wind. He signaled for the men to continue the descent and went to check it out as they sighed in relief. The bone user was hoping it was Raga so he could kill the man himself, but he wasn't disappointed when he recognized the effeminate boy with those strange eyes. He was incredibly pale, and there was a nasty gash going up his right leg, but it was slowly leaking blood, meaning the child was still alive. The Kaguya fumbled around in his pack before pulling out a vial of bluish-green liquid the consistency of liquid jello. It was Kabuto's latest experiment. The medic was obsessed with Karen's healing ability, and this was the result of a failed experiment to recreate it. It was basically a mixture of medical drugs and herbs that were made to hold Karen's chakra. It took a little bit of Fuyu and Jutsu work, but they were able to replicate the results and create this. Although it was incredibly hard to make and could only be done in limited supply because it needed so much of Karen's chakra just to get such a small amount. He tilted the vial to the boy's lips and he drank. What little color the frail child had returned, and his red eyes slowly opened. Am I dead? No, you were hurt, but I gave you a healing mix. You will live. Oh, said the boy neutrally as he looked away from the Kaguya. You don't sound very enthusiastic? Said Kimimaro with an eyebrow raised. The child sniffled and shifted uncomfortably. You should have let me die. I'm just going to be all alone again. Kimimaro sat down next to Ranmaru and looked at the sunrise. You know, I used to be all alone like you. Abandoned by the people I cared about. The lavender-haired boy turned to look at the teenager. I didn't want to live either, but then Orochimaru-sama found me and gave me a purpose. It hasn't always been easy. I've bled and sweat many times my body weight for him, but I have a reason for living. Ranmaru leaned into the older boy seeking some sort of comfort that Kimimaro awkwardly provided by wrapping his arm around the frail child. Do you think he would accept me too? Kimimaro nodded as he looked into the distance. Could he heal me? Of that I have no doubt. He offered to heal you even though Raga asked for the seal of power, but the swordsman refused because he wanted to keep your eyes for himself. Kimimaro was making things up now, but he knew his master would be interested in this strange dujutsu, and maybe some small part of him wanted to help Ranmaru in the only way he knew how. Kin was on the verge of ripping her brown hair out by the roots. The childish man in front of the girl had been nothing but annoying since they left Hot Spring Country. He would deflect all of her questions about who he was and where they were going by trying to get details about her night of passion that led to her pregnancy. The one night they stopped in town, she had to use the crappy tubs in the seedy inn he brought them to because he skipped out of the room while singing about the joys of peaking. He didn't even really hold basic conversations with her. When they traveled, the pervert said he had to keep his senses sharp in case of pursuit, even though it wasn't very likely, and when they camped he would have his nose buried in his notebook, constantly giggling perversely. Now they were in fire country and the kunoichi wasn't taking it anymore. Alright, I'm not taking another step till you answer the questions I've been asking since the start of this trip. The man turned with the same cheerful smile, and his tone was nothing but kind. However, Kin couldn't keep the shiver from her spine. Considering I was skilled enough to defeat or escape the pursuers that had you dead to rights, I don't think you can make me do anything. Jiraiya didn't project any killing intent, just the magnitude of his presence was enough to cow Kin. However, he could never stand to see any woman unhappy. But since I'm such a nice guy, I'll tell you. I know you were a shinobi under my bastard ex-teammate, and I have a pretty good idea of what's baking in the oven too. Kin flinched when he finished before understanding dawned on her features. Ah, you recognize my glory now? Yeah, you were Orochimaru's and Tsunade's teammate. What was your name? Jiraiya forced down his frustration. It was obvious she was just joking to get back at him for the past 2 days. I'm the gallant Jiraiya, legendary sage, best-selling author, strongest shinobi alive. That guy. Yeah, him, said Kin dismissively. Everyone said you were a massive pervert that would get distracted by a girl glancing at him. Jiraiya palmed his face and dragged his hand down to his neck. Sure, anyways, considering I can knock you out and get you back to Konoha faster and not have to explain things to you, I'd shut up now. After making sure the kunoichi followed his advice, the hermit continued, well, I'm taking you back to Konoha. We'll go to the hospital and you can get a physical from my teammate while I get the Hokage." He turned and started walking again, waiting for a snarky response, but to his pleasant surprise she was sufficiently cowed by his awesomeness and didn't say a word. The man was pleasantly surprised and thought that he should make her his apprentice instead of Naruto. The seinen was starting to get tired of mouthy blonde know-it-alls. Kimimaro got on one knee and bowed in front of Orochimaru while Ranmaru poked his head out of the sling that Kaguya fastened on his back. Much like Raiga had, "I have returned, master. Our shinobi are putting the gold in the storeroom as we speak. However, Raiga's men aren't worth outfitting." "Excellent, Kimimaro, we'll send them off to a base in need of test subjects, but where's Raiga?" questioned the Serpentine man. The bone user stood and frowned at the mention of the name. The blonde Chunin who was at the base I was healed at was leading a team to investigate the mines. The fool fell in battle instead of telling me they were coming so we could evacuate. Kabuto stepped from behind Orochimaru's throne and pushed his glasses up his nose. "Uzumaki Naruto, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko. Was he the one who killed Raiga?" The man was far from elite, but that would still be impressive. Kimimaro frowned after discovering the blonde's name. The Uzumaki clan had killed many Kaguya during the sacking of Ozushiogakuer. Many of his clan members had claimed it was the start of their downfall. "No, his team killed the swordsman. Uzumaki Naruto battled my bone clone, although him being a Jinchuriki explains that strange chakra." Orochimaru's eyes lit up with interest. "He used the Kyuubi's chakra, you say? How did the fight go?" The bone user forced his rage at the memory of the fight down to give his master a neutral viewpoint. "At the beginning I was dominating him, even though he was using the sharingan. Then his eyes changed color so he began drawing on some of the beast's chakra, but he still wasn't too much of a challenge." The teen frowned as he remembered the rest of the fight because it went downhill from there. "The boy seemed to improve with every exchange though, he even stole some of my moves and used them as his own." Kabuto chuckled at Kimimaro's obvious frustration. "The sharingan is an impressive tool. Probably as formidable as the Shikatsumiyaku, if not more so." The silver-haired teen gloated inwardly as the Kaguya ground his teeth together. "Indeed. I still had it well in hand until his team arrived. Instead of engaging me with them he called them off and his eye morphed." The snake summoner leaned forward as his face lit up in surprise. "What do you mean morphed? Gained an extra tomoe?" The bone user shook his head. "No, it became a six-pointed star." Orochimaru leaned back as he turned an accusing eye towards his chief spy. "You never said anything about him in Geikyu, Kabuto-kun." The teen shrugged as if he wasn't worried. "My father wouldn't tell me if the Hokage ordered him not to. Honestly, I had no idea. I just helped with the surgery and it didn't happen then. I can tell you that much. We only put in a regular sharingan, not even fully mature." The two turned back to Kimimaro and he took it as a cue to continue. "Yes, well, this new form of the Dujutsu allowed him to summon black flames that consumed my clone. He put them out and I injured his teammate. This caused him to go berserk and draw on more of the Kyuubi's chakra." "And how much did he use? Did he lose control? What types of abilities did he display?" Kimimaro blinked at the sudden barrage of questions from his master. Usually the man never showed this much interest even if he was obsessed. He summoned 3 tails, but then went back to 2. It appeared the Jinchuriki was about to lose control, but he calmed himself and my clone ran out of chakra because of the damage inflicted over the course of the fight. I'd say its abilities were based around chakra manipulation, and his chakra was like an acid or some other corrosive substance. The former Hokage candidate leaned back in his chair and digested the information for several moments. "Naruto-kun seems to be growing into quite the impressive Jinchuriki. Still, that's a subject for another day. Is that young boy on your back the same one that came with Raiga?" The boy timidly ducked behind Kimimaro now that he was the center of attention. However, a nudge from the bone user got him to answer. "Yes, Orochimaru-sama. I found out Raiga was lying to me, and when I tried to help the Konoha ninja he cut me out of my backpack. Kimimaro saved me and he said you could heal me and give me a purpose." Orochimaru chuckled while trying to sound gentle. "Yes, he wasn't a very nice man. I don't know if Kimimaro told you, but I offered to heal you for free, but he refused. I didn't think it was my place to tell you though." The frail child nodded. "Kimimaro did tell me, sir. I know I'm weak now, but I'll train really hard to get strong. I promise." Kimimaro placed a comforting hand on Ranmaru's leg that stopped the boy's panicked rant before it got out of control and interjected on his behalf. "What he says is true, Orochimaru-sama. I thought that since Raiga was no longer around to claim his prize, it should go to his second." "Did you now?" said Orochimaru, not giving anything away as he eyed Kimimaro strangely. He was quite surprised that the normally merciless warrior would go out of his way for somebody like that, but in hindsight he shouldn't have been. Ranmaru probably reminded the Kaguya of himself as a child. The serpentine man leaned back and thought about it. Honestly, there would be no real harm. The boy had an interesting dojutsu and was already quite attached to Kimimaro based on their interaction. That attachment would grow to affection, and then loyalty. The Kaguya was blindly loyal to Orochimaru, and Ranmaru would probably follow in his idol's footsteps. The madman smiled wide as an interesting idea flitted through his undeniably brilliant, albeit twisted, mind. He could get Kabuto to heal the child the regular way, but the scientist in Orochimaru was always quite curious to see how a child whose chakra network wasn't developed enough for regular use would react to the Juujin Jutsu. The nature chakra generated from the cursed seal would also heal Ranmaru if he survived the procedure. Yes, that does make sense. After all, I'm sure your eyes did most of the work in the mines anyways. Now Ranmaru, I can heal you and make you strong like Kimimaro, but it's going to hurt and it is very likely to kill you. The boy looked scared for a moment, but a glance at the stoic Kimimaro, who gave him a nod, hardened his resolve. I accept. Orochimaru chuckled gleefully. He already knew the answer to the next question based off Ranmaru's tone, but asking it would only make him look better than Raiga, which was very important right now if he wanted to secure the boy's loyalty. My, how enthusiastic. You didn't even let me finish. I can get Kabuto to heal you the regular way. It won't hurt and you won't die unless there's some type of freak accident. Ranmaru looked interested, but now time to pull the hook away before he could bite. But you'll never be anywhere near as powerful if you choose that procedure. Any interest the violet-haired boy had faded. No, I still want the first one. Kimimaro gently lifted Ranmaru from his cocoon and softly laid him on the floor while Orochimaru explained, "Excellent Ranmaru, now this looks scary but don't panic." To the child's credit, he only let out a squeak when the man's fangs elongated and Orochimaru's neck extended as his head shot forward. He clamped down where the boy's neck met his spine and watched the seal form. Oh, the heaven seal. How interesting. The equal of the earth seal in every way, continued Kabuto. He is just as much potential as you had Kimimaro. To the Kaguya's surprise, it didn't bother him that someone may be able to serve Orochimaru better than him someday, even though that was always his greatest fear. It was probably because his master had another loyal and competent follower, because there was no doubt in his mind Ranmaru would survive this. He needed to. Then perhaps I should be the one to train him. Orochimaru tittered as Kimimaro gently lifted the comatose child. If that would please you. That went even better than planned. He just loved it when others did his dirty work. Especially when they had no idea they were doing it. Karashi left his room quietly, trying to sneak out without alerting his grandmother, although he didn't really need to be this careful. The old bat slept like she was dead, probably because she should have been. For some reason this crappy old shack raked in customers, and she had received several offers for the stand and her recipes over the years, offers that would allow his grandchildren to live comfortably. The man smirked as he crept down the stairs. That was only if he didn't blow it all himself. The old plan to get his grandmother out of the way was to leave for a while because Sancho had a hard time taking care of herself. He was hoping she would have an accident while he was away, but every time guilt would get the better of him and he'd return home quickly. Karashi had decided to ditch his old half-baked plan and started baking another one when he returned yesterday. According to that blonde brat, those men that kidnapped him left today and the mine would be abandoned for some time before officials came to investigate. He was going to sneak in, grab all the gold he could carry, go on vacation for a month or so, and drink so much he'd forget he had a grandmother. Karashi cackled inside his head as he reached the bottom of the stairs, sure of his success. His heart stopped when he saw a short, shadowy figure in the corner of the room sitting on the windowsill with their legs dangling outwards. "Ah, I'm sorry. Don't hurt me, I didn't want those ninja to take you guys out, I swear." Moonlight streamed through the window, revealing it was just his grandmother looking at the night sky, and the cowardly grandson sighed in relief. "Grandma, what are you doing up right now? You should be in bed, it's very late." Sancho didn't respond in any way or turn around to acknowledge Karashi, she just continued to stare out the window. The brown-haired man approached hesitantly while softly calling for his grandmother, wondering if he didn't need to go to the mines now. He finally stood next to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right, Grandma?" "Yes, Karashi, I've never felt better," answered the woman, except her raspy voice seemed smoother, almost serpentine. "Are you sure, Grandma? You're acting well. Not senile, but that's strange for you." The woman turned, revealing she had golden snake-like eyes and her wrinkled cheeks were stretched in a wide smile, revealing wicked fangs. The man screamed, turned, and ran, scattering all the tables and chairs in his path. The demon in his grandmother's skin just cackled before letting out a high-pitched wail. Karashi turned his head to see she had opened her mouth impossibly wide, like her jaw had unhinged, and a large white snake about a foot wide and 3 feet long jumped out of it. Karashi let out a girlish yelp of his own and burst through the kitchen door. It swung loosely on its hinges, squeaking repeatedly, as Sancho's grandson frantically rummaged through the knife drawer. He cut himself on several of the sharp blades before pulling out a large meat cleaver and his grandfather's old stiletto. According to his grandmother, it was a knife, so it went in the knife drawer, and the door stopped squeaking as it thudded into something solid. Karashi heard the hiss and gulped loudly while rapidly looking in both directions. The sound of the snake's scales rubbing over the rough stone floor was audible, and the man looked directly at the demon when it came around the corner of the island in the middle of the kitchen. The coward panicked and threw the stiletto at the slithering reptile, but the handle clattered harmlessly off the ground and the short blade fell harmlessly next to the white serpent. Karashi looked at the monster as it approached, confident that if snakes had lips it would be smiling. He raised the meat cleaver over his head with both hands and charged with a battle cry. Unfortunately, his valiant charge was halted when he struggled to lift his foot and tripped on the stool that his grandmother hauled around the kitchen to stand above the counters. The cleaver slipped out of his hands as he used his forearms to break his fall, but when he landed he was staring into those terrifying golden eyes. The snake's jaw unhinged, revealing dripping fangs, and the man tried to roll away, but found he could no longer move. The demon unhinged its jaws, and darkness was all that Karashi knew from that moment on. The snake finished devouring him before shedding his old skin and stepping out as the cowardly grandson of his former host. The old bat didn't have enough energy to get him back home, but this one certainly did. The snake dumped some of the woman's strongest alcohol all over the stove and stone floor until it got out to the dining area. It then grabbed a lit candle from a candelabra mounted on the wall and threw it into the kitchen. The stand exploded in a ball of fire and an unseen silhouette leapt high above the flames before disappearing into the forest. Here it is, the conclusion of the final mission in part 1, and it's longer than expected. For the final mission it had a lot of firsts. The first chase scene of which more will follow, so I'd appreciate your thoughts. The first Mangekyo use, the first time Team 7 really gets their asses kicked, and there was also a lot of chemistry developed in the chapter as well. I know it's really long, but it almost had to be, and by the time I realized that I was too far into it and couldn't find a good spot to split it up. The scenes after the Jonan v Raiga and Naruto v Kimimaro were also supposed to be short. There's a lot of things in this chapter hinting towards the future, so I hope you read carefully. On a side note, Kishimoto is really pouring out the backstory here. We finally learned something about Kabuto, and I have to say I think his backstory is the saddest by far. In my opinion, used to be held by Haku and Sasuke before he turned into a total asshole, and I lost all sympathy for him. I don't want to spoil it, but just looking at the situation as a whole, it's effed up, like really effed up. I almost feel bad for what I'm going to do to him, but he's still an asshole. Just an asshole with a rough past. Jutsu list: Kushios, Yataiku Zushi no Jutsu, Summoning, Food Cart Destroyer, summons a large mid-air over a target. Gukuo Kamaitachi Dakamaitachi Raikyuu Kirigakur no Jutsu Reizo, Ikazuchi no Utage, Lightning Burial, Banquet of Lightning. B-rank Raiga generates electricity in his blades, then stabs them into the ground and unleashes the stored energy in a river of lightning that varies in size. Someone without the lightning fangs generates a dense ball of electricity between their hands that explodes outwards into countless bolts of lightning, as narrow or wide as the user wishes. Ikazuchi no Kiba, Fangs of Lightning, C-rank Raiga crosses his fangs and raises them to the sky. They send electrical energy into the clouds, allowing him to create and control bolts of lightning. Tsubaki no Mai, Dance of the Camellia, Taijutsu Kimimaro creates a saber of bone by modifying the bones in his arm. Teshi Senden Ninjutsu, 10-finger drilling bullets, Taijutsu, the only real ranged technique Kimimaro has and very vital to his fighting style. He launches the tips of his finger bones at the enemy. They are capable of incredible damage because of their velocity and rotation. Can fire as fast as the bones regenerate, and infinite supply. Futon Satudangan Raigeki no Yoroi, Lightning Strike Armor, C-rank defensive jutsu. Raiga coats himself in a protective layer of lightning that is capable of turning away middle-level attacks. Raryu no Tatsumaki, Lightning Dragon Tornado. A rank Raiga is struck by a bolt of lightning, but instead of dispersing, the energy concentrates around him. The man begins spinning, forming a twister of lightning, and then the head of a dragon forms at the top before it attacks. Shiho Happo Shuriken Karamatsu no Mai, Dance of the Larch, Daijutsu Sharp, needle-like bones protrude from what seems like every inch of Kimimaro's skin, protecting him from physical attacks. Yanagi no Mai, Dance of the Willow, Taijutsu large bones protrude from every major joint, shoulders, knees, and elbows, and his bombs. He then uses very acrobatic maneuvers such as spins and flips, sudden bull rushes, and wide sweeping slashes. Very unpredictable, predicated on parrying and countering an opponent. Bone clone Kinjutsu, forbidden technique of the Kaguya clan. Allows a person or group of people closely related to create a replica of a clan member's skeletal and muscular systems. It is very chakra intensive and even when performed as a group can result in deaths. The clone has many advantages over the original. It doesn't feel pain, has a faster regeneration time, powered by chakra not blood, can perform any Shikatsu Myaku based move. Major disadvantage is the lag time between the original's thoughts and clone's actions, making it useless against a faster opponent, one on a similar skill level, or a superior one. Tessenka no Mai, Hana, Dance of the Clematis, Flower. Taijutsu Kimimaro concentrates a large amount of chakra and compresses as much bone as he can into a fine tip. The hardest bone created by the Shikatsu Myaku Tessenka no Mai, Tsuru, Dance of the Clematis, Vine. Taijutsu Kimimaro pulls out his spine and regenerates it immediately. The cartilage and nerves extend until a whip is formed, though they can still extend or stretch, allowing Kimimaro to adjust the length easily. Soarabi no Mai, Dance of the Seedling Fern, a rank the only ninjutsu of the Shikatsu Myaku. It allows Kimimaro to create a dense forest of bones that he can merge with, much like Hake could merge with his ice mirrors. The Kaguya can then attack from any position and move unhindered through the forest.
That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.